Thank you. Didn't even have to ask for attention. How's that? Great audience. Seemed like everyone was here for a feed. It was hard to get you inside. Welcome everyone to come along tonight. This is the fifth of our AusCycling Roadshow presentations, and certainly have been going very well. What was that? Licorice up the back? Is that licorice? You might throw a few of those down for us. That'd be fantastic. Special request from MTBA. Good start. Come bearing gifts. You can stay. So, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Scott McGrory. I am a former professional cyclist and have a very fond place for Sydney in my heart after winning an Olympic gold medal here a long time ago in the year 2000. Still this century, so I'm still proud about the fact that I won this century and not last. But obviously I've been involved within cycling for a very long time, at first as an elite athlete, and then secondly as a coach when I first retired, and a team manager for some of the smaller national road series and professional continental teams, and then into the media, and currently working still heavily within Cycling Australia as a contractor, but also doing lots of media work. I will be commentating the Olympic Games next year in Tokyo, which will be my third Olympics, meaning I need to be across all of the disciplines that we're talking about here tonight in mountain bike, BMX, road and track cycling. So certainly looking forward to the Olympic Games next year. Therefore, I have a long history of seeing the evolution of cycling in Australia in all the disciplines, and am very excited to say that what I've been witnessing and listening to and working with over the last couple of days, in the last week or so, has been quite encouraging to see where we are looking to head forward to, and that's what we're about here tonight, is to help educate the room and the people that are watching online at home, the benefits and the opportunities that come with forming AusCycling. So we do have some very distinguished guests up here with us tonight that will be here to firstly go through the presentation of what AusCycling is and how it will work, and also to answer all of your questions towards the end. Now, we've had, as I say, the fifth. This is the fifth of the roadshows that we've done. So lots of the frequently asked questions have been updated online. So hopefully you have had the opportunity to jump online to auscycling.com.au and just check out some of those questions as they are getting updated. As you can imagine, there's been an enormous number of questions coming through, and the gentlemen have really been very good at answering pretty much all of them to the best of their ability, that's for sure. So right down the end, representing BMX Australia, is the CEO, Martin Shaw, and beside him is the CEO of Mountain Bike Australia, Shane Coppen. Then in the middle, Steve Drake from Cycling Australia. Next to Steve is Darren Alones from BMX Australia, and then it's Duncan Murray, who's the chair of Cycling Australia, and then it's Peter McKendry on the end here for representing mountain bike. So a good mix of the three disciplines that we'll be talking about tonight. And as I say, I'm excited about it. So I'll just throw you over across to the chair of Cycling Australia, Duncan Murray, to just get his thoughts before we get into the presentations. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for having us here tonight. This isn't a uncontroversial proposition in New South Wales, it would seem. There's certainly a vocal group who are sceptics about the proposal. I'm a straight shooter, so I will shoot straight and try and give you the best answers I possibly can. I've been chairman of CA since the middle of last year. I've been a sceptic and critic of the administration of cycling for many years. I came in hoping to try and fix the organisation and lift it, and the board and Steve as the CEO and I decided pretty quickly it couldn't be fixed, so it should be just shut down. But a parallel view we formed was that the problem is really the federation. That, and I'll come to it, there are big winds of change coming at the sport, and it's impossible when you've got 19 organisations, because there's CA and the 8 member states, there's BMXA and the 8 member states, there's mountain bike, then you get into vets, etc., etc. There's 19 boards, 138 directors, 19 strategic plans, and 19 times 1 equals about 5. And there are huge, as I said, winds of change coming at us, and I've spoken about this a lot over the last couple of weeks. I had dinner with David Lepatillon, the president of the UCI, earlier this year, and he was looking particularly deflated because he'd found out that week there were more people with Zwift licences, memberships, than there are people in the world with UCI affiliated racing licences. 1.4 of his and 1.5, 1.6 Zwift. There are 35 million Strava members. The manufacturers will tell you, Shimano, Matt Bazzano, the SRAM guys will tell you that in 5 to 7 years, 70 or 80% of the bikes sold in the world will be electric. They're big organisations with huge financial capacity like the NRMA and RACQ and RACV, who will look at those electric bikes and think they're registrable vehicles and they may be lost from the sport. When I grew up as a kid, and I've been racing bikes for 30 years, you go to a park and you'd see kids roaming around the parks on BMX bikes, half of them they'd made from hard rubbish collections. You go to a park these days and you don't see kids riding around the parks. They're at home, on game consoles, on phones. My 10-year-old daughter decided she wanted to ride to school, which is 3 kilometres away, last year. I got a phone call from someone at the school saying, your daughter, we understand, wants to ride her bike to school. She's not allowed to do that until you sign a release and waiver, because we've had advice from our insurers that we owe her a duty of care, and if she's hurt, you might sue her. We would prefer she came to school on the back of your wife's 4-wheel drive. So she's not allowed to ride to school until you release us. We've pulled out the bike shed because the insurer has advised us to do that to discourage kids from riding to school. We've got 1,800 registered juniors, and it's going down, not up. There isn't a politician in the country, not one, I don't think, who, despite the fact that there's 3.5 million Australians who ride a bike every month, feel under any pressure from the cycling industry. You can talk about high performance, but the bottom of the pyramid is the commuters and the families and the kids, and we're living in dense cities where there are affordable housing issues, and cycling is the mode of transport of the future. And there are voices. The Bicycle Network talk, we try and talk, some organisations do well. The West Cycle guys in WA are doing a really good job talking about advocacy or advocating in relation to infrastructure. But we're not really driving the narrative on commuting, on infrastructure and on transport across all those organisations. With 138 directors, there isn't a single full-time policy person writing national plans and policy propositions on infrastructure and transport. There are pockets of excellence, and I want to really acknowledge those pockets of excellence. In New South Wales, I think Graham and the team are doing an exceptional job of junior development and revitalising the racing scene. The West Australians are doing a great job on advocacy. There's a really healthy cyclocross scene in Victoria. So there are pockets of narrow and deep competence, and we need to protect those, and I'll start talking about trust in a moment. But we're not going to be able to tackle these big issues if we're still 19 organisations. And what's more, you can't take the pockets of excellence. You can't take, I went to a meeting with the Victorian Treasurer last year before the Victorian election, and Netball Victoria, out of the last Victorian election, got $138 million. Cycling got nothing. We hadn't put an infrastructure plan to the Victorian government. There are very few governments which have infrastructure plans put together. If they do exist, and some states do have them, you should pull them into the centre and make them available to everyone. If Graham and Glenn are doing a fabulous job of junior development, we should be able to pick that up, pull it into the centre, and you'll see in the org chart, beside high performance, there's a head of pathways. You should be able to pull that into the centre and say, this is what's happening in New South Wales, let's do it in Queensland, let's do it in WA, let's do it in Victoria, let's do it in Tassie. So we're not going to be able to get all the excellence into the centre until we've got a proper organisation. The next thing is that this is about the democratisation of the sport. I've grown up in clubland, and the clubs are the real owners of this sport. The people who sit on, get card table signing registrations on a Sunday morning, who stand on corners as volunteers, it's the clubs that own this sport. And I think we should take the ownership of this sport. Our core proposition is, let's shut down Cycling Victoria, let's shut down Cycling Australia, let's shut down BMXA, let's shut down MTBA, let's roll it together and create one new organisation that's properly resourced, that can actually take this sport to where it wants to be, and let's hand ownership back to the clubs. I've said to a couple, I get probably one or two club presidents call me a day at the moment. And one of them said, I said to one of them yesterday, if you want to get hold of me, if you've got a view, if you think I'm doing a bad job, how can you go about getting hold of me? And he said, I can't, you're inaccessible, you're way up here. I said, in this world, if the clubs own this new organisation and there's a democratisation of the sport and a dismantling of the bureaucracy, you just form a WhatsApp group in a modern digital social media world called Grumpy Clubbies, and you invite the 20 club presidents who aren't happy, and you call me or Steve Drake or our successors, whoever's running this organisation, and we will have to come and listen to you. Now, you will own the place. You will own the sport. And I think sending cycling back to be owned by the clubs is a really healthy thing. And finally, I think the issue with the doubters at the moment is trust. Now, we're all in this room because we love riding bikes and we're passionate. And if you're really passionate about something and you think you're doing a good job of it, how do you hand it over to a crew who you don't yet trust? Over the next 2 months, the people who are on the board will be revealed. There'll be 3 BMX people, 3 mountain bike people, 3 road and track people, 3 appointed by the Commonwealth Government. I can see Neil Cameron, a former president of BMX, sitting in the back. When I first started speaking to Neil 18 months ago, he was Darren's predecessor. There was very little trust between the organisations, and we've come a huge distance since then. There's great trust and collaboration and warmth and empathy between the 3 national organisations now, and it was originally also, there was a view I inherited that this should be a CA takeover. Let's tackle that one head on. That there should be 5 people on the board of any newco from CA, 1 from BMX and 1 from mountain bike. And Steve and I went into the first room that it was the genesis of this conversation 18 months ago and said, no, it can't be a CA takeover. We've got to start again. So we have to shut CA. We've got to euthanise the joint. And it's a merger of equals. There's 3 BMXs, 3 mountain bike and 3 from road and track. It doesn't matter who's got how many staff, how much money, what the scenario is. This has to be a merger of equals, and it's become a merger of equals. And I think I'm really, really confident it will be a well-governed, well-run, well-capitalised organisation set up for success. And if you look at the number of people actually in these organisations today and the amount of money actually in the balance sheets, they're not set up for success, they're set up for failure. And when there is pockets of success, it's just because a couple of people work unsustainable hours. So I'm comfortable you can get over the trust issue. At the end of the day, we're all going to have to take a leap of faith. There are things that scare me about this. Creating a bureaucracy, the homogenisation of our identity, other bits and pieces I'm happy to answer questions about. But there are things I fear here. We're all going to have to take a leap of faith. But it's a leap we have to take. And this is a special room. I don't think there's been a room ever in the history of this sport where this conversation's been held, where all 3 disciplines have come together and have had a respectful conversation. I think when I first called Neil, I was on a tram coming up Flinders Street in Melbourne. I said, hi Neil, I'm the incoming chairman of Cycling Australia, can you have a cup of coffee? I think he was nervous meeting me. My board here, I'm meeting you, I could be garroted. Now we have a reform conversation happening for the first time. And as a generation of people who are running this sport, by being here today, we've made more progress than any of our predecessors have made in 130 or 140, whatever it is, years. And I think that's an important glass half full thing to reflect on. So if we love the sport, we've got to set it up for success. And a 19 organisation federation or a 9 organisation federation is not the answer. It's not a collaborative system. And we've got an opportunity to fix it. So thanks for having us along tonight. An enormous amount of work has been put into these slides, into these documents. You'll see that. There's bodies of work behind it. If you've got questions, ask them tonight, ask them subsequently. And thanks for listening, and thanks for caring enough to be here tonight.
Thanks, Duncan. Oh, we'll do after the presentation. So I'll just bring Peter McKendry up now from MTBA, have a quick chat, just a brief chat. Then we'll get into the presentation. So the 3 CEOs will do the full slideshow presentation so you get a good understanding of what the concept is, and then we'll put it to the floor. And we'll also take questions online as well, but predominantly we want to hear from you people here that have made the effort to really, or were able to make the effort to be able to come in here tonight. So firstly, round of applause for MTBA representative Peter McKendry.
Thank you. Thank you all for attending tonight. Appreciate it. Peter, I'm from Kellyville in the northwest of Sydney. Passionate mountain biker, not a racer. Well, when I did race, I usually came dead last in the group, so now I'm just a weekend warrior out in the bush. If you wander out onto some of our great single tracks around Sydney, you would recognise me as a guy wrapped around a tree or splattered against a rock. It's just the way I ride. Not very good, but enjoy it immensely. The gentleman at the front here knows that firsthand. He's scraped me up off the ground a couple of times. So as Shane and I looked at the opportunity for One Cycling, we very quickly realised that we are proud of what we achieved in mountain biking with the resources that we had available to us. But this opportunity was far bigger than what we could provide through the existing structure of MTBA. So with that on board, we took this opportunity to understand what this meant to MTBA, to the members, to the clubs, and the further we got into it, the more we realised that this needs to be understood, it needs to be put to the members for a vote, and it needs to be embraced for what it is, not for what the past has been. So looking forward, we can see that there's so much more opportunity, so much to be had, not just for mountain biking, but for cycling and BMX. And in that journey with the others, we've come to know BMX and cycling represents the total cycling picture. And that in my journey, my sons have missed out on opportunities by not knowing the full cycling picture. They didn't enjoy BMX as they were growing up. They didn't then jump into mountain biking and translate into cycling opportunities on the track because we simply didn't know about that. So as they grew up, my awareness was around rugby, soccer, some of those other sports that have a much greater national presence. So what I would say to you tonight is take that opportunity to embrace and understand what this actually is and what it means to the future of cycling. We have, and we've jumped on board, and the more we look into it, the more we see that it is the worthwhile outcome to be achieved. As Darren said, there are many problems. The history behind us, we don't want to lose that history. The problems that we've had historically as separate entities, that's not what it's about. It's about what we could do in the future with cycling, putting it on a national stage and enjoying the benefits of what that means in attracting better opportunities, better funding, and translating that to every Australian out there, because cycling is one of those sports that does translate to every child and every adult at some point in their life. and we can make that bigger and better into the future. So I'd say please take the opportunity to listen tonight, ask those questions, demystify those areas. I'm sure you won't have all the answers out of tonight, but take that opportunity to pick up the phone, talk to us, get your answers, and at least give it a good thinking. So thank you. I'll leave it to that. Please embrace the opportunity, ask those questions, and catch us afterwards if you need more answers. Cheers.
Thanks, Peter. Okay, let's get into the presentation. Now, as I said, the three CEOs will share the floor now to go through. And Darren, is it? Yep, Darren's going to be the first one to get going. Oh, you don't say something? Oh, okay, sorry. You're going to sing the national anthem tonight, is that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
with you. No. Hey, Darren Allen from BMX Australia. I've basically come into the sport supporting my son riding BMX, and I sort of came in through BMX South Australia, and it sort of came from a member of the board of BMX South Australia that they encouraged me to join to fix their website, because I've got probably 30 years experience now in federal, state and local government in network security and cyber security or network administration. So from that point I then encouraged to go on the board of BMX Australia, where I met fellow board members, and Neil come to us, Neil Cameron, back when he was chair, sort of came to us and said, I've spoken to this Duncan Murray character, and we're looking to sort of make a change and go down the AusCycle path. And from that point it took a little while of actually sort of understanding what he was saying, and then all of a sudden it sort of made sense that as a sport BMX, we could impact ourselves locally, but it didn't really change the sport in general. We had a finite amount of resources and money, but we couldn't actually do what we would really like to do for the sport and the sport in general. So tonight, I encourage everyone to listen, ask questions. If you don't want to ask questions, there's a website. Form your question on paper or email it in, and someone in the background will get the information to you, or come up to us afterwards and have a chat. But as for that, I'll hand it over to the guys now, and they can continue on with the presentation.
Thanks, Darren. So the CEO of Cycling Australia as it stands, Steve Drake.
Okay, we've had a pretty fulsome introduction tonight, so I'm not going to give another one, so I'll just try to get things going. crux of what we're talking about. We can be stronger if we ride together. We can make better use of the resources that we already have, and we can also get access to more resources to reinvest into the activity of cycling. And I use the word activity deliberately because, again, the history of the 3 bodies that are up here, or the 19 that we're going to be talking about tonight, is from the sporting side. But we need to broaden our focus because that's going to be the way that will help to fund the sport and the broader activity of cycling in the future. Unless we're able to do that, we're going to continue to be a relatively minor sport. This slide sets out some of the tangible benefits of One Cycling. It aims to be a bit of a summary, but the key one is from a competitive perspective, only one licence. And that means it'll be simpler, the sport will be easier to access, and it'll be cheaper for a majority of riders. As we build the strength of the organisation, both from a human capital and also a financial capital perspective, we'll be able to direct more resources into club and member services and strengthen that grassroots part of the sport. It's something that the 19 organisations, no matter which one you look at, they're all small, undercapitalised businesses, and we can't provide the services that members really want. I'll come back to this commercial outcome point because it's key. I'll give an example of a successful national organisation, and I can give you the data from our 19 bodies. Most people will be surprised that aside from event-specific sponsorship, there's not a single 6-figure sponsor, cash sponsor of cycling in Australia of the 19 organisations, and that is really a travesty. And partly it's because we make the sport and those bodies hard to deal with, and sponsors don't know how to deal with us, and that's a real disadvantage. Duncan mentioned in his introduction that we don't have people who are full-time focused on securing facilities and infrastructure for cycling. It's not to say that people aren't trying, but we're not, again, a criticism of our current structure is we end up employing a bunch of generalists because we divide ourselves into 19 small businesses. By coming together, we can have some specialists who can assist our state general managers and our clubs in lobbying for those additional facilities. The example that I use is cricket, and I'll come back to that a little later as well. That lobbying doesn't apply just to facilities, it applies to things like safety. Certainly on the CA side, I noticed a post from Graham recently around some members asking about lobbying for cyclist rights and so on, and Graham quite rightly said, well, we don't have the resources to do that. Under AusCycling we will. We'll provide better career pathways for staff. Again, at the moment we're divided into 19 small boxes, and the only way to get out of one of those boxes is to quit and get a job in another one of the boxes if that's what you want to do. That's disruptive for the one that you're leaving. It's not, because it's often not planned, and it doesn't give people an opportunity to stay and develop their careers within the broader structure of cycling. This proposal can help to address that. It provides a national footprint for all disciplines. On the road and track side, we're lucky at the moment, we do have that, but mountain bike and BMX don't, and this is a way that can help to grow those disciplines. Dunk made the point again about the fact that kids aren't riding as much as they used to. And there are a range of reasons for that, but it's ultimately comes down to a change in parental attitude to cycling. Often parents and schools are concerned about risk. We need, I think, actively to be addressing that, to be pushing bike ed programs into schools, helping to change the attitude of parents and allow parents to allow their kids to ride to school. It's become a vicious cycle. Why don't you ride to school? Because it's too dangerous, because there's all these parents driving their kids to school. You know, unless we do something active to address that, that problem is going to continue. And it's going to become worse, because it won't be very long before a 5-year-old's going to be able to get an autonomous vehicle to come and pick them up and take them to school. And then we'll just have a bunch of fat blob kids, and you know, we don't want that. We can recognise our volunteers better and help to encourage them to volunteer, and then greater financial strength is something that I'll keep coming back to, because at the moment we're just not strong enough to compete with the major sports, the professional sports that have that are competing for the attention of kids, parents, and potential sponsors. So we have to change the way we're structured to address that. First question is what's the new model for membership? We've come up with a 2-tiered model, a base membership fee, which is shown in that left column. Is this a pointer? Yes. Which, again, what we've tried to do here is dramatically simplify the membership structures that you see across the various disciplines. There's probably over 200 or 300 different membership types at the moment between BMX, CA and mountain bike. We want to get that down to a really simple model, because the complexity is just not needed, and all it does is add cost, introduce errors, frustrate members and potential members, and we can do a better job. As a result of that, we can also help to reduce the cost of it. So here what we're talking about is an all disciplines race membership for $250. And when we've been looking at how we reform the model, we've also focused where we could on trying to reduce the price for kids. So again, all disciplines racing licenses for kids under 19, $120. It's a lot cheaper. The next 2 slides are just a summary of some of the things that I've already talked about. Cheaper license fees, a louder voice. Again, because we are at the moment divided into 19 different organisations, or if you include the vets and the advocacy bodies, you get to over 30. We're just too easy to ignore. You know, which politician is worried about the cycling lobby at the moment? If we come together as a more cohesive group, we'll have a louder voice and we'll get better outcomes. That will help riders, and it will also help clubs. We'll be able to get, over time, more success in terms of lobbying for infrastructure and facilities. We'll be able to improve the voice for rider safety, and we can also do more on the pathways side for our emerging athletes. Same for clubs. If we're getting more kids on bikes, they're going to find their way into the club network. If we're making cycling a more high-profile sport and a more prominent sport in the Australian landscape, those will flow into the clubs. If we can provide some better systems for club admins and reduce the burden of managing a club, again, that will help people, those volunteers who are so critical to our club network. If we can be, again, more successful in advocating for infrastructure, those facilities can be used by clubs in many cases. One of the, it's no secret that I'm Victorian, I'm from Melbourne. One of the issues that's been faced in Victoria at the moment is a reduction in the number of places that you can race. And, one of the things that occurred to me over time is that CA and maybe CV in the past, they haven't done a good job of advocating for facilities because they assumed that we would always be able to race on the roads. And there are places now that I raced on in the early 90s or the late 80s that are now 20 k's inside the city limits. There's houses for another 20 k's past where we used to start bike races, and no wonder that participation is dropping. They used to say, oh, cycling's the new golf. And why was it the new golf? Because it didn't burn the whole day to go and do a bike race. But if you've now got to go and drive 70 k's to get to where the bike race starts, and that takes you an hour and a half, and then you warm up for a while, do the bike race, drive back, surprise, surprise, it takes as long or longer than playing golf. And it's translating into how much participation is happening on the competitive side. That's because 20 years ago, we should have been advocating for more facilities, particularly in major centres. So again, this is a key function. It's white space that isn't provided now and can not ever be if we stay in the same structure, because we can't fund it. The next couple of slides, oops, I've skipped one. Next couple of slides go through some examples of the benefits of the membership structure that we're proposing. This is a Queensland family. Sorry, we haven't been custom making every page for every roadshow. It shows five-member family who ride and race a mix of disciplines. The cost for that membership today is $806 plus club fees. Under our proposal, it's $575 before a family discount. For an elite New South Wales female who rides road and mountain bike, currently it's $377 before club fees. In the future, $250. Again, it's trying to make the sport more accessible. I talked about using an example of success elsewhere in the world. British cycling has done a great job over recent years of not only achieving success at elite level, but also in boosting the participation in cycling more broadly in the UK. I think Dunk said to me they just had their 250,000th participant in their women's riding program. But they've been able to activate because they've had the support of some fantastic sponsors, and they've done deals with people like HSBC that start from right at the bottom, from their Let's Ride and their schools programs, all the way up to their elite programs across all of their disciplines. And I mentioned the crummy performance of us in terms of raising cash sponsorship. This deal's worth something like £8 million a year. Now, I'm not saying that we're going to come out with an £8 million deal straight away, but our ability to deal with a sponsor as a cohesive unit will improve the chances dramatically. I'll give you the example of how it would work today. If we were approached by, let's say, a large consumer products company who wanted to market to all of the participants of female participation programs in Australia. The first thing we would have to do is organise a conference call with 19 people, one from each of the organisations. That might take a month by the time we got the diaries sorted out. Then we'd have a chat about, okay, what sort of information will we need to provide to that potential sponsor in order to interest them in using cycling as a vehicle. And we'd quickly find out that across those 19 entities, some of them wouldn't collate that data or would collate it in completely different ways. So it might take us 2 months to get that data sorted out. So we've already used 3 months. We've gone back to them. And again, let's say that we're successful in securing that sponsor. Then we have to have an argument between all 19 of us as to how we carve that up. And the more likely outcome is that they've gone off and done a deal with AFLW or something like that. We make it hard to deal with cycling as a sport, and so we get suboptimal outcomes. We also make it hard to deal with government. And partly this is because we're not resourced to advocate properly. Again, there's no full-time advocacy person pounding the halls of government, working with our state GMs to advocate for cycling-related facilities. It's not to say that there aren't people who are trying, but we're not utilising the expertise of people that just focus on that. And so we don't get the outcomes we need. Again, the example I use is cricket, who have maybe a dozen people who are basically full-time political activists, political lobbyists, and, you know, surprise, surprise, they're getting funding for some lights at a local cricket ground or some female change facilities, all these sorts of additions that, again, where's our share? We shouldn't expect to get it unless we set ourselves up to achieve it. So this is, again, our structure today. The 3 NSOs, we make it hard from a consumer perspective. So somebody who's trying to join, somebody wants to ride multiple disciplines, we make it hard from a commercial perspective. How does somebody deal with cycling? Then we have the federated structure. Now, I can't comment on BMX. I haven't been involved directly in the BMX world. But I have been involved directly in the cycling world now for 2.5 years as a director and a year and a half as CEO. During that year and a half, there's only been 3 times where there's needed to be a system-wide discussion about a decision that needed to be taken. Now, if that same decision was sought within the mountain bike world, which is unitary, my guess is that that decision would have been taken in about a week and might have involved a board call, maybe 1. Each of the 3 instances that have occurred during my time took 2 months and burned amazing amounts of senior management time, not just at CA and in the state bodies, also with people donating their time at state board level and things like that. All of that is wasted effort that should be invested in clubs and riders, and it results from our structural problem. What we're talking about is just completely changing that structure. So again, people talk about a CA takeover or whatever. No, this is a CA destruction. This is, let's start again. I'd be very surprised if anybody in this room thought, okay, let's draw the optimum structure for cycling and started with 19 boxes, because it doesn't make sense. What does make sense is a customer-focused organisation with officers and staff in every state and a central body that services those local officers, providing benefits to clubs and riders. And that's what we're talking about. Officers in every state. It's an improved business model, and it sets us up for the future. We don't have to have arguments amongst the 19 entities, and the really key point is that it aligns the incentives of all the staff. Now, again, Dunk talked about how we want to set it up so that somebody who's great but happens to work in South Australia can provide services to members in Queensland or provide services to members in New South Wales if they have that capability. Because at the moment, the structure almost actively disincentivises that. And it doesn't lead to great outcomes. The structure that we're proposing can do that. It will also let us invest more into cycling. You know, from day one, we'll add $2.5 million of capacity to the system because Sport Australia will give us that free kick. But also, you know, from the commercial upside that I've described, over time we'll be stronger, we'll be positioned for growth, and this is the way to take cycling forward in Australia. It's a model that aims to preserve the good things that we've already got in the system, but to set us up for the future. I'm not going to read through all these points because they're basically a repetition of what I've been through. But again, if we're looking for improved outcomes from the management of cycling in Australia, staying the same is not the answer. We need to set ourselves up for the future, and that's what AusCycling is all about. So thanks for listening, and I really look forward to answering some questions when we get through the rest of the pres.
Thanks, Steve. For those who don't know me, my name's Shane Coppin. Been with Mountain Bike Australia for nearly 6 years in the role of CEO. And the really unique thing and interesting, exciting thing for me about this whole AusCycling experience has been rooms like this. In those 6 years, I might have had a few occasions where I met with people from CA, maybe met with some of the state groups, met with the NSO groups, but certainly never got to sit in rooms and talk and collectively work with everybody across all the disciplines. So when you ask what is AusCycling, this is what AusCycling is an opportunity for us all to work together. Our tag says let's ride together, but really what we're proposing is an opportunity and a model where we work together for the benefit and outcomes of our members. When we go through the presentation tonight, I ask that you just keep an open mind and consider the model that we're proposing and that what that might present and what that might realise in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. But also at the same time consider what a decision to not change or remain in the status quo might mean in 5, 10, 15 or 20 years. So I'll move on to the next slide. But the last thing I do want to say is that when we started this journey, our challenge was, how do we create a collective and cooperative organisation that represents and works for the best possibilities, benefits and opportunities of all members of our sport, of all clubs of our sport? And in the future, how does that then work and benefit all our kids, our grandkids, the broader communities of cycling and the collective group of people who just want to ride their bike as a whole? So if we look into the governance of AusCycling, it's structured on the basis that we would have a nominations committee, which is no different than what exists today. I'll come to the representatives, their names are there, but I'll come back to it on another slide. There's a transition board that will exist for 3 years, and in the first year of the transition board there'll be 12 members. It's not a takeover by any one organisation. This is the complete establishment of an equal and fairly represented organisation at a board level by all of cycling. 3 members from Mountain Bike World, 3 members from the BMX community, 3 members from the road and track community, along with 3 independents. It's a skills-based board, but it's a representative of the whole world of cycling in Australia. From that transition board in the first year, it will reduce as 3 members from the elected bodies drop off. It'll reduce to 9 members going forward. And from an ongoing basis, the board of AusCycling will be 9 members. 6 elected from within the cycling community, and then 3 independent appointed directors. Part of that process will result in a new CEO. So my 2 colleagues, Steve and Martin, and myself, we won't be continuing in the role, nor are we seeking the role of CEO in the new organisation. We believe that it needs new leadership, and this is an opportunity for that to occur. It needs someone who's new to the sport, somebody who's new to our organisations to lead it and take it on its journey into the future. And collectively with that, one of the biggest changes that we're proposing is that we're putting the voting and the ownership into the hands of the clubs. These are the organisations that create the flavour, the uniqueness, the heart and soul of cycling across all our disciplines. They're the groups that work every weekend to deliver those benefits and events and all those things that you go out and enjoy. And it's only right that they now own this new organisation. So that's what this model is proposing. One of the critical elements that we've worked into the model, and this came as a result of the workshops that we had with the various states, organisations and the mountain bike community, was that we needed to ensure that there was a voice always in that state and territory location, and we've created what's called the State Advisory Councils. And these are initially made up and representative, in theory, of what the board of AusCycling looks like. Representatives from road and track, representatives from BMX, representatives from mountain bike, who will all work closely with the state and local officers, including the state and general manager. They'll elect their own chair, and they will be instrumental in ensuring that the culture of both the state or the locality or the discipline or what is important to the communities in those regions is heard and represented throughout, 1, the management, and 2, through to the board of AusCycling. These advisory organisations will This is just a short list, but they'll look at things like state team selection, discipline insight, ensure that the history of the sport is protected and that it's embraced and that it's promoted. We want to hear from that. It's also about volunteer recognition. We talk about that. Volunteer recognition for me is something that is very, very important. Through this proposal, we have suggested a national volunteer program or a national recognition program for volunteers. We want to see an opportunity to create a database of volunteers across all the disciplines that can then be promoted across the disciplines. But more importantly, we want to recognise formally the contributions that is made by so many people in supporting all these disciplines and sports on a weekly basis, which is you and from the clubs. And there'll be guidance on the transition matters. The transition and the implementation process to bring all 19 organisations together is significant, and we appreciate that. But the strength of that comes from the local officers, the local staff, the state boards, the local communities and clubs, and you are instrumental in helping us achieve the uniqueness and the need to get the transition right. Without your contributions, we'll be making an assessment from where we sit at a national level. That's not how this has to happen. It has to be originated from the grassroots level, from the club level, from the state level. So that'll be a very important piece that you're included in that process. So when we get to the overall structure of how AusCycling is proposed to operate, we have national commissions and the state advisory councils. And if we start with the state advisory councils, they're at the bottom of the slide, and there's no reason that they're at the bottom of the slide, it's just how it has been prepared. There'll be 8 of those, 1 in each state and territory, made up from the slide before. Each one of those will elect its own chair. The chair of each of those state and advisory councils will then sit on a national advisory council right at the top that sits next to the board. And the chair, they will elect their own chair at the national level, and the chair of the board, or the chair of the National Advisory Council, will then sit as a representative on the board of AusCycling. So there is a connection there from grassroots level and state level all the way up to the board. If you look across the 5 yellow boxes, you'll see that we have 5 pillars that we're creating the organisation on. There's a corporate pillar, and within there'll be a number of business development units and various working groups from time to time. There'll be an engagement area. There'll be a delivery area, pathways, and then there's the Australian cycling team. So to us, pathways is something that is absolutely fundamental and crucial. And we've prioritised it in parallel to the high performance program that currently exists as the Australian cycling team. If you look on there, we've got a Sport Heritage Commission, which is something that came also out of the discipline workshops, and that is something that's also very important to the process. So in forming the board for AusCycling, the transition board, we've got a nominations committee. It's made up of Sharon Willoughby from BMX, Peter McKendry from mountain bike, Linda Evans from road and track, and there'll be an independent member still to be appointed. None of these individuals will then sit on the board of AusCycling. So they have a very important role in ensuring and developing the board for AusCycling in its first evolution. And then you'll see the proposed transition board, and you can see the 3 positions for each of the disciplines right now. And you can also see the 3 independent representatives or nominees. Currently, the chairs of each of the NSOs will move across to the board. So Darren from BMX, Duncan from road and track, and Lee, our chair, will move across into the board. But that leaves 6 more positions from within the current disciplines to collectively to fill the role. So we've developed a structural model, and we probably haven't talked about it much yet, but we've tried to create an organisation that is centred and built from the needs and of riders, members, anyone who rides a bike. We are very much first and foremost about building an organisation that is built from the participation base of cycling. And that also incorporates those who just ride recreationally to those who compete internationally. It's all about the riders, it's all about the clubs. And what we've created here is a chart that reflects that. So we've got a number of state and territory offices, as Steve mentioned earlier in the presentation. We've consolidated down and there will be state offices in every location. But these offices become very focused on delivery back to members and clubs. Their primary role is to deliver service in the areas of engagement, participation, sport and local delivery of events, advocacy, infrastructure, development, education, pathways, all those things. So what we've looked to do in this model is create a national office, in essence, that supports local and state and regional offices, so that they can do the job of delivering outcomes and benefits directly to members without having to worry about all the other things that might come with running a business. Those will be supported from the national office, and then we move our way back down to the board. There are things like membership, and that's better off centralised so that we can support and provide and build, fantastic membership teams that work across all of disciplines and support the whole industry. So when we look at what the AusCycling office functions might do at a state and national level, this chart it's not an inclusive list, but it's certainly a reflective list of a number of the things that after the workshops were highlighted as, fundamental and critical to the operations currently in state and local offices or territory offices. So if you look through the list, most of that has been preserved. What we've taken away is things like data processing, and we've added things like integrity and diversity and inclusion, and we've looked at things like, I can't read this chart, that's half the problem, sorry. Corporate management. But what we've endeavoured to do is structure an organisation where I guess you take the non-sexy things of running a business and put them at a national level to support those really enjoyable and productive things that you do at a state and coalface level. And that's the organisational model that we've structured. On current numbers of workforce, there's approximately 80 staff working collectively across all the various disciplines and organisations. And under the AusCycling model that we're proposing, that number lifts to about 90 on day one, all in the same brand. But what we've done is we've made efficiency savings, but we've reinvested those directly back into workforce. It's not about trying to save money in the organisation, it's about trying to redistribute those monies in the organisations where we can make savings to return improved services back to members and individuals and people who ride a bike. So what we have been able to do though is also pick up some areas where we do have deficiencies in the areas of diversity and inclusion, in the areas of integrity. None of us have those roles now. We struggle on advocacy, so we've been able to put those in, but at the same time improve the workforce at the local and state and territory office level. There's been a lot of questions asked about flow of funds into AusCycling and the model. If you have a look to the left-hand side, it indicates where most of the funds for all our organisations generally come from. It's through membership, might be through sponsorship, might be through grants, and through events, and certainly there's some areas where there might be other investment from time to time. They'll all come into the AusCycling model, and when we reflect the logo right here, just consider that that logo represents across the whole organisation. So there's many, many brands that constitute that individual box right there. And then if you look to the right, that you'll see that the flow of funds comes straight back out to support the needs and the workforce of the local and territory offices. If there's grants provided by state or territories, that comes back out 100% to deliver towards the outcomes. One of the goals of AusCycle is to actually get to a point where the grant monies that come in are not used to help the organisation survive. They're actually used to help the organisation thrive. We want to be in a position where the organisation can deliver a workforce, provide the core basic operational needs of AusCycling from sustainable revenues that it generates itself. Then all the extra monies that can come from commercial upside of sponsorships and grants are used to directly return benefits that are tangible to members, clubs, and anyone who wants to ride a bike. There's a portion of funds that will go to support the national office, but I think this chart clearly shows that there is no intent to sort of hold monies back. It's to flow back and deliver outcomes to members and at the grassroots level. We said that it's a club-owned model. So one of the big challenges that we faced was how do we create a proportional membership or a proportional voting system that is reflective and fair to all organisations, all clubs, all disciplines, and represents the population and the membership bases equally as best we can. We looked at models that might allow a club to, if we went with some models where it was 1 vote per member per club, we would have some clubs that might have 10 members and some clubs that might have 800. That's an 80-to-1 discrepancy. The small clubs are not going to support a model like that. So we spent a lot of time trying to determine a model that we thought was fair, reflective, and gave voice across the entire range of clubs that we might have. There's approximately 520 clubs in the combined entity, so it was no small task. But if you have a look here, if you have a look here, what we've been able to do is the balance of power within the AusCycling model rests within clubs that have upwards of 149 members. So we'll move to the next slide, where we give an allocation. So we give you an indication of how that model that we just prepared balances out across the disciplines of mountain bike, BMX and cycling. And I would argue that they're quite evenly split relative to our membership bases today. And then we look at that across the states as well. So we might move on, conscious of time, so you can all have lots of questions.
Are all these slides online now?
Yeah, all these slides are now online, so you probably go online if you want to get them now too. So the question about who votes, and this is when we talk about who votes for AusCycling. And it's critical that people vote. In the federated model, other than in ACT for road and track, all the various clubs will be asked to vote by their state organisation as to whether they want to accept and adopt the AusCycling model. And it requires a 75% majority for that to pass. Then you move that up to the next level in BMX and CA, and the state organisations will be asked to vote, representative, I would imagine, of their membership or their clubs, as to whether they wish CA to then adopt, or BMX to adopt, the AusCycling model. And Martin will go through what those questions will be a little bit later. In the mountain bike space, we'll be asking our individual members under our current constitution to vote on the AusCycling model. So we would require 75% of those members who choose to vote. So if out of 1,000, we would need 751 vote yes. Okay, so it is really critical. This is an opportunity to change the future of cycling, to change the opportunities and benefits that could mean for the sport of cycling collectively. So this is in your hands. You make the decisions as to whether you vote for this. But I would encourage you to do it. For the first time, we really are asking you to determine the future of your sport. So you need to vote. You need to consider this. You need to consult with your club members and ask them what they want to do, what's right for them. In the case of mountain bikers, seek as much information as you can so that you can make an informed decision about what it means, but also what it might mean if you don't change. Because can we change our futures in the status quo? And that's the thing that we all need to consider. How do we do that? To the right, there's a table that indicates some suggested dates around the various meetings in order to try and meet a time frame by the end of the year. Now, we've been challenged a little bit, why the rush? Why the end of the year? We've seen a number of presidents change in state. We've seen a number of presidents change in national organisations, and we just have to go back then and brief them and bring them all up to speed. I think the other couple of things that we need to be mindful of, this is a big question for cycling. This is a change to our future, and it's something I personally am very excited about. But we have put our sport into a point where it needs to make a decision, and for the security, to sort of get stability back into our sport, let's get to a point where we can make a decision. Implementation will take 12 to 18 months. So even if we make a decision by the end of the year, the major changes are still a long way off being realised. I think the other thing is too, in the case of the staffing of all the organisations and the workforce, they're wondering what their future looks like. So when we've been asked, can we push it back and all these things, we really need to bring it to a decision so that we can decide what our future is and get to work to try and recreate a new future. And that's the end of my bit.
Thanks very much for that, Shane. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Martin Shaw. I'm from BMX Australia. I've been involved with that organisation for about 3.5 years now, and it's, I've got to say, it's been a really enjoyable process working for BMX Australia, being involved in such a great sport, and it's also been great to be involved in this process of looking at AusCycling and seeing what we can try to deliver for the future. And a really important part of that has been the way that the three organisations have worked together. And there's no secrets in this room that in the past we've had some strained relationships, but it's been really fantastic in the last 18 months since Duncan and Steve have come on board at CA. We've been having some really great discussions, really honest, open, at times robust discussions, but always really respectful. And that's given us some real comfort that this process is a genuine coming together of three organisations. And that's something that we really need to consider. We were able to put our differences from the past behind us, and in doing so, we've been able to come up with something that we think is a really exciting proposal. So in terms of the implementation, Shane's taken you through the process. There'll be a two-stage voting process, firstly at a state level and then at a national level. So what will the votes be? Well, there'll be a number of resolutions that are put forward to the members. And as Shane said, this is a decision to be made by the members, by the member clubs. And you know, there's been talk out there about how this is something that's just being ordained from above, and that's not the case, and never has been. It's always been recognised that this is a decision that will be made by the members. So there'll be a number of resolutions put to the general meetings at a state level. The first of those will be to approve the AusCycling Constitution. Okay, obviously the document that will govern how the organisation is run. And that will be up on our on the AusCycling website, hopefully within the next few days. There's just a few slight amendments being made as a result of some of the feedback that we've had through the workshops that we've run. Oh. Jesus. The second resolution that will be put forward would be a resolution to transfer the assets and liabilities from the state organisations to AusCycling. Okay, once again, there's been some discussion out there that this is about federal bodies appropriating funds from state organisations. And that's, nothing could be further from the truth. Once again, that will only happen if that's a conscious decision that is made by the members. Okay, as part of that process, if the members support this, they will support that process and they will make a formal resolution at a general meeting to approve that. The third resolution would then be to approve the voluntary wind-up of the organisation. So as we move forward and we move into the one organisation, that's then a process that would take place. So a couple of things to remember about it. These are special resolutions, so they will require a 75% support of the clubs that are voting, or in Shane's case, 75% of their members. The second point is that these resolutions are conditional. Okay, so they are conditional upon these resolutions, the similar set of resolutions eventually being passed at a national level. So there's no problems with the state voting to support this process and then feeling like, oh my goodness, we've voted to wind ourselves up and this hasn't gone forward at a national level. If that situation occurs, that it's not supported at the NSO level, then effectively these resolutions don't come into force and aren't enacted at a state level. Okay, so they are always conditional on these things being taken forward at a national level and supported at that national level. So once those resolutions and votes are done, that would then be, as Shane mentioned, carried forward to a national level. Those similar resolutions would be put forward at a NSO general meeting. Then if they're supported, there's a number of agreements that would be signed between all the organisations, and things about transferring assets, what's being transferred, when are they being transferred, and what will happen between the time when those agreements are signed and when they are completed. So there's a lot of work to be done around that, but they're all done in order to ensure that the process is fair, it's open, and it's supported by our members if this is to go ahead. We've talked about some of the great things that could come out of this, and we don't like to spend a lot of time concentrating on the no vote. But as members, you do have to spend a little bit of time thinking about what are the implications if we don't support this. So there's a lot of great things that are coming out of this, and it's really a case, if we don't support it, well, yeah, we keep what we've got. But we've also got a whole lot of lost opportunities, and a whole lot of lost opportunities in spaces that we're just not working in at the moment, and things that we feel could take cycling forward and make it a really fundamental part of the Australian sport and recreation landscape, an organisation that everybody would be proud to be a member of. Not just one of 19 small organisations, but one really big one that's big, it's bold and it's brassy. So the sort of things we're looking at, no single licence. Okay, so if you ride multiple disciplines, this is the opportunity to have a single licence. If we pass up, we go back to the status quo of joining various organisations. The licence costs, there's some winners, there's some losers in it, but what we've tried to do is make sure that there's more winners in it, and especially for kids to get them on a bike, make it easy for them, make it inexpensive to get them out riding and taking part in a fantastic opportunity. We'll lose the opportunities to reduce those duplications that we run. We all run 3 different CRMs, we all run 3 different websites, 3 different financial systems. We've all got, 19 different auditors. There's a lot of stuff that we duplicate. And what we want to do, reduce those duplications, take the money that we're spending on it and put it back into the sport. Put it back into getting kids riding, getting people riding, advocating for cyclists, get more people riding to work, kids riding to school. At the moment, we've got a really limited capacity to do anything around lobbying for infrastructure, lobbying for rider safety. As Steve mentioned, we've got nobody. In 19 different organisations, we don't have one person whose job is out there to be there and talking to government, talking to politicians and getting outcomes for cyclists. Across 19 organisations, not one person has that as their single role. We want to have numerous people doing it. We want to have people wandering the corridors of Parliament every day and talking to people and making sure that when they call, government ministers, MPs, pick up the phone because they know that we're representing cycling. Steve touched on the sponsorship. We're going to continue not having a 6-figure sponsorship if we continue with the same structure. It's too hard to work with 19 organisations. So we get piecemeal things. We get little bits here and there. If we want to go get the big fish, if we want to be able to talk to a Commonwealth Bank, to a Woolworths, we've got to come together and we've got to make it easy for them. Because at the moment, we're making it really hard. We need to be a single voice for cycling in the community. We need to be the voice. And with government, right, at the moment, easy to ignore. If we keep the status quo, we're still going to be easy to ignore. They're not going to pick up the call. They don't have to. We're representing 20,000 riders in CA's case, 15,000 for mountain biking us. That's not the numbers that are going to send shivers down a politician's spine. If it's 100,000, 200,000 eventually, suddenly we got numbers, and suddenly they care. Suddenly they'll pick up a phone. Our financial capacity will maintain being $2.5 million weaker, and we'll still be 19 different balance sheets, and we'll still be in the same position we're in. We won't be able to aggregate the money that we have and add to it with the support of Sport Australia and use that to make a really big organisation, make a great organisation that can support our riders. There's still going to be confusion with the fragmentation. So little Gracie, who comes home, tells mum that, you know, I want to get involved in cycling. Mum may not be a cyclist. She doesn't know. Who do I ring? Do I ring Cycling Australia? Do I ring BMX Australia? Probably doesn't even know that BMX or mountain bike exists. It's all bikes to her. It's just a bike. So we make it difficult once again. But if we've got one organisation, we can point them in the right direction. How old's Gracie? What is she interested in? What are the programs that we run? Let's make that a one phone call that needs to be made that can lay out all the opportunities that are available. And also we'll still have limited career pathway for our staff. Every time a staff wants to take a step up, they generally have to move out of the organisations. And it's not an effective way of running an organisation. If we have a staff of 90, there's opportunities for growth within. If we've got a staff of 6, like we've got at BMX Australia, there's not a lot of opportunity within that. It's a fairly flat structure. So every time somebody needs to take a step up, they move on. That's great. We lose a whole lot of information, a whole lot of knowledge and a whole lot of experience. So there's a lot of things that we have to think about in terms of lost opportunities if we do say no. What's the timetable with all this? Well, we've been through a process where we've had discipline workshops. So we had 3 of those in early August. We had one for BMX, one for cycling, one for mountain bike. We got representatives of the state associations in mountain bike's case, we had representatives from across their club structure and got them in, ran them through the proposal. We got some great feedback, some great discussion through that. And the feedback we took, we worked that into the model. So the state advisory committees and the national advisory committee are some of those things that have come back through that, and we're happy to include that. We then ran a combined discipline workshop where we got all the disciplines in together, possibly the first time in cycling history in Australia, getting all the disciplines in the room together. Went through it again, and once again we've taken some great feedback and once again incorporated that. And now we're out going around the country and meeting with people like you, with club representatives, with individuals who just want to find out more about this organisation, what it could be, but also have their questions answered. And we're really looking forward to getting that open to the Q&A very quickly. So I'll keep moving on. We've mentioned the voting, October, November. That's when we would like to have it done. After that, hopefully everybody supports it and we can then go into a detailed planning process to assist with the transition. And eventually getting to a stage where AusCycling would be operational, we're looking at Q2 2020. So there's a big transition phase that needs to be gone through, and we want to give ourselves plenty of time to do it. So it's not a case that we're going to vote in November and December 1st, AusCycling is in place. There's a lot of transition work that needs to be done, and we will take our time doing it. In terms of a transition approach, what are we looking at? Well, we think day one's going to feel a lot like day -1, right? Especially at club level. The things that you guys are doing out there at the moment, we want you to keep doing them. What we hope and foresee is that over time, you'll feel the effects of the greater support that you get. greater support from the state local office, greater support from the national office. And those things make your job easier. But we're not trying to change what you guys are doing at club level. We don't want to change that. You're doing fantastic work. It's the coalface of the sport. And what you're be doing on day one is exactly the same as what you were doing the day before. There's not going to be a whole lot of rules and regulations that come in over the top of you telling you what you can and can't do. Okay? We want to keep you guys doing exactly what you're doing at the moment. The second phase is that the quality of the outcome in the transition trumps the speed of the outcome of the transition. So we're going to take our time. If we need to take a little bit more time in order to make it right, in order to get it correct, in order to make it as seamless as possible for our members and for our clubs, then we'll do that. There's no great rush with it. We don't have to have this operational by the 1st of February. We need to take our time in that transition process, and we will do that to make sure it's as good as possible. In doing so, we will be looking to the state and territory leaders to take a real leading role in that transition, because we want to make sure that what's happening at state level at the moment continues to happen, and those things that are important are worked into that transition process. And that's vital for us. We don't want to try and transition for every state from a national office. It's not going to work. We're going to rely on the leaders within each of the disciplines, within the states, to tell us what's really important and make sure that those things continue and that the transition is as smooth as possible. Not only in the planning, but in the actual implementation of it. Absolutely vital for us that this is as smooth as possible. And finally, everybody's going to be respected in this process. One of the things I mentioned earlier was how BMX has felt respected in the discussions that we've had. Really respected. And we view this the same way. People who are out there busting your backsides at club level are going to be respected. The people who have been fundamental to the success of the state offices are going to be respected, and their views will be sought, and they will be incorporated into it.
Excuse me, some of us have got to get up and train tomorrow morning.
Yep, I'm almost done.
Just saying. You're not one of them.
So, in terms of what AusCycling can be, that's all those things. We've been through them. Because we have people need to get up and train tomorrow, they're the things that we believe can come out of AusCycling. And if we get it right, then hopefully we've got something pretty cool.
Just riding, okay. We will get into the questions very quickly. I just want to very briefly just summarise a couple of things that I got from all three. Steve Drake, as for some of you may know, but some of you won't, that Steve is a former Australian road cycling champion. He then went on to be in the banking world and left our shores, went to Hong Kong and to the UK. But with his banking brain, for him, I know it really just makes financial sense for this whole concept to go ahead. For Shane, it was he's noticed the refreshing and transparent approach with the heart and soul of the clubs at its core. And that's what I've picked up from listening to these guys over the last couple of weeks as well. Really passionate and understanding about the respect that's come through the three different disciplines conversation. And for Martin, through robust yet respectful discussions, all three disciplines agree AusCycling is the best way to create opportunity and growth for all of us, which is really important. It is for all of us. It's not just those that have to get up early tomorrow morning to go training. But I did know Steve's not the only former Aussie champion in the room. Bit of a shout out to Jamie Drew, former national champ over the background there. And also Graham Sears, who's an Olympian for those not in the track cycling world. May not remember that Graham Sears himself was a 1980 Olympian. John Sunday obviously is just the king of Heffron and Sydney. And we also have perhaps we've probably also got the fastest runner on two wheels here as well in Dave Evans. But let's get some questions. Who wants to go first? We do have a microphone here. Matt's got. So Matt is also from Sport Oz, so the Sports Commission. If there's questions that need to go directly to Matt, he can answer them as well. So first hand up was over here. So let's go over here, please.
Yeah, look, thank you. There seems to be some really good opportunities there. And I've got a question which is possibly different from, we're a different organisation from most. We're an MTBA registered organisation, and our organisation doesn't ride bikes at all. So we're not a club. We have a decent membership. All we do is walk the halls of government. All we do is lobbying. We're with Environment Minister next week. We're with Sports Minister last week. We've been working for 12 years. Our time adds up to about $800,000 of volunteer time. And we helped get national parks to change their policy in 2010 in New South Wales. We've taken national parks corporate staff out on e-bikes to get them to understand pedal assist e-bikes, and they accepted them as mountain bikes. And we'd love to work with you guys, and we just want to see how we fit into that picture. We're not a club.
Shane would be best positioned. And can you, for my benefit, what's the organisation?
It's called Trail.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think I alluded to at the start that, or I spoke earlier at another forum, that I think cycling is really an industry. It's more than just a sport, it's more than just an activity, it really is an industry, and there are many, many groups like yours that are now appearing to support that industry and provide the benefits for all riders, regardless of what the discipline might be. Within the AusCycling structure, we're endeavouring to create and have advocacy and support around infrastructure and those types of services. Now, we don't want to go out and recreate the wheel. We don't certainly want to go out and try and start that from scratch. So we want to work with organisations like yours. We want to create partnerships and draw on a collective strength that the two might operate and offer ultimately to the members and people who want to ride a bike.
I guess another point is about 95% of mountain bikers are the recreation side is massive. We did a project with Strava and counted 30,000 individual mountain bikers just in mountain bikes, which is at least double the today's national membership. So the recreation side is massive. And I just want to make sure that AusCycling doesn't become an organisation that represents the bikes and the riders. This is out on the real grassroots recreation riders, which is the bulk of the riders.
So I'll try to repeat the question for you, just for those who can't hear, and given that it's live stream, that you raised the point that you don't, that there are many more people who ride a bike, and particularly in the mountain bike space, who are not members of our individual organisations, and that you don't wish to see those groups get overlooked or missed in the AusCycling model. Have I captured the question? Absolutely. I think it's one of the critical things that we've identified as a group, that we need to do more in the recreational space. That is a growth opportunity. It makes up currently 30% of our membership. I think that's changed from 5 years ago when it was 9% of our membership base. You know, I would love to see an organisation grow through the AusCycling structure to 250,000 plus members, but I don't see all those coming from a racing side. They come from a membership side and a recreation and participation side. That is where we need to work very hard to make those connections and those engagements and offer a value offering. That's where there's opportunities to work with your organisation and groups to ensure that we are meeting the needs of those groups. So our focus in and the growth of sustainability of AusCycling comes from providing an opportunity to connect and engage with those recreational members much better than we do today. We want to be much more than just a sport.
You'll get fit tonight, Matt. Plenty of questions in New South Wales.
I think your answer to that question or proposition was absolutely right. We have to spread the net much further. I was just, while someone was speaking earlier, looking at the Bicycle New South Wales site, and it's essentially aiming to do the things that we're talking about tonight. So there's another organisation that could be approached. I think our numbers are weak. They are really weak. And for as long as we talk of ourselves as a sport, politically speaking, we only have access to sports ministers. And we want access to transport ministers and road ministers and so on. I would have thought that a good first step would be to develop within the current structure some kind of political secretariat, to hire a couple of advocates, to spread the net, to gather up the numbers and to go to government with plans. And when you go to government, you're only going to get politicians are looking for constituencies, aren't they? They want votes. In order for them to support us, we actually have to give them something. And that may be to do with safety or some aspect, heaven forbid, licences or something. Some exchange has to happen for us to get real purchase politically, and to build the safety, to build the sport, and to build the recreation side of things. Small steps would be my recommendation, and a political secretariat. My background is I ran a national membership organisation for a number of years, the ASA, the Australian Society of Authors, and it's vital, we found it vital to have entree to those ministers and departments that mattered, you know, the Attorney General's Department, the arts ministries and so on, in terms of our members. That happens when you've got talented, dedicated staff. Costs money. I'm not sure that we need the giant structure before a smaller, earlier, more encompassing and embracing structure. It's a statement rather than a question, sorry.
We'll bring the mic over first. So for the benefit of the people, just so we know, for the people that are watching online, they do need the microphone to be able to hear the questions.
Hi, just responding to some of that question then, we do have an advocacy group representing cyclists in this country. It's called We Ride Australia. Steve Hodge is the half a head that represents cyclists in this country and advocates to the government on a semi-full-time basis. So it does exist. I think that needs to work in with One Cycling. At the moment, Steve works with 19 different organisations. If he is trying to push something through, to have someone like him and then build on that, to me, with One Cycling makes a huge amount of sense. So there are organisations out there that are advocating, but they have unbelievably limited resources, and until we move to, well, I believe something like this, we're just not going to see that level of input or employment or someone advocating for us grow. So,
thanks, Dave.
Sorry, I missed your name, sir.
My name is
Angela, how are you going? Thanks for your question. I've had some amazing conversations in this role over the last 18 months, but one was with a senior bureaucrat who used to work in Indigenous Affairs, who I knew from my time in Indigenous Affairs in Canberra and had moved into health. And she said to me that 5 years ago, well, she was having a crack at me about the lack of voice that cycling has as a sector rather than a sport in infrastructure and planning and cities. And then she also said, 5 years ago my husband borrowed a bike from a mate, started riding bikes. 6 months later she found him in the shower shaving his legs with her pink Gillette razor. A year later he's horrified by spending 10 grand on a bike. Then a year later he started calling the group of guys he rode with on a Tuesday and a Thursday and a Saturday his men's shed on wheels. And then she said to me, I had this epiphany the other day. He came home and just casually referred to his bike as his mental health machine. And I found out this is a thing. Like, people talk about their bikes as their mental health machine. And I'm in charge of $4.5 billion of mental health funding. And it occurred to me, I hadn't realised until he said that he actually is, he's 10 kilos lighter, he's happier, he's a better husband, a better father, probably a better professional because he picked up cycling. But it never occurred to me that someone from your sector, rather than sport, would walk through the door and say, how can we work together? And the chance of
Hodgie pulling that off nationally, despite his enthusiasm and history and background and passion. We've got a snowball's hope until we do something like this.
Well, I'll let you choose who you want to go to, Matt. I don't want to play favourites, but if you can actually just give us your name, we know yours, Rupert. But if you can give us your name, just so we understand who we're talking about.
My name's Rupert Guinness. I'm speaking in my capacity as Secretary of East Cycling Club, not as a journalist, just to make that clear. Firstly, thanks for coming tonight to explain it all. I appreciate that. There's a lot to take in. At this point, I'm still not sure, and maybe I've got to read more into it and understand more, but I'm still not sure exactly what the clubs directly get. But I'd like to one concern just to raise, to make it more specific. You talk about the essence of, say, getting one, say, hypothetically, one major sponsor for one cycling altogether as one family. With the clubs, and I know in East, and I'm sure a lot of other clubs are so, well, obviously reliant, but appreciative of community sponsorships. I know we are at East with Roland as one of our major sponsor, and they've had a major role in the development of a development team which raced at NRS, and then recently in South Korea under the banner of New South Wales Cycling. So you saw a junior development pathway that's taken a number of years, thanks largely to a local sponsor, which came from a local community. Now, besides the money that comes from local sponsorships, there's also that community identity that local clubs gain from that. So my concern is if this new world has this all-encompassing sponsor, will the clubs still maintain their independence to have their own sponsors, even if that sponsor may be a marketing clash or a sponsorship clash because of business concerns with a major national sponsor? Because I think it's imperative you can't cut off our local community ties from a marketing sponsorship point and as also emotional point of view.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, Rupert, and we're not proposing that we would dip down into club level at all with a national sponsor. I think the same applies at state level too. It's all about defining the asset categories and then doing a better job of trying to monetize those. At the moment, I think we don't activate well in that space, and potentially we also have clashes. If we can define those assets better, and then through the creation of this organisation, I think we can also, it provides a more interesting opportunity to a gun marketer to come in and actually work for us, rather than going to NRL or cricket or whatever.
Hi, I'm going to stand up. John Sunday. I'm here in the same. Well, then you're looking at someone, not just listening to a voice. Same capacity as Rupert, local club, Eastern Suburbs, and I guess we've all got different outlooks and perspectives of what we're expecting from cycling from a national, state and local level. Mine's quite simple. I only care about Heffron Park, that's quite obvious. But I care very passionately about that, and the reason I came along tonight was to find more about what this ambition is, because there's certainly been quite a bit of momentum in social media and other avenues in the last few weeks, and I certainly want to thank the whole panel for the amount of effort and time that not only put into tonight, but the whole roadshow. Which leads to me, I just wanted to ask you a few questions, I'm a bit puzzled why we've got a whole 8 weeks when clearly someone has put a lot of time, effort and money into this presentation, and I just wanted to know who that was.
Your question, John, what's the process been to date, and how has this all come together?
Who put the mechanics of the presentation, not the actual presentation of the slides, so I guess that was a marketing person just sitting in an office, but someone has put a lot of thought into this,
so
and who was it?
There are three answers to that. So there's, at the bottom of the presentation, I think you'll see a series of consultants. So the Sports Commission, where the cash has had to be paid, the Sports Commission has paid for an advertising agency to help us and law firms to give legal advice. So when we've had to spend cash, the Sports Commission have spent some of that cash.
How much did that cost?
Couldn't tell you off the top of my head. They funded
Roughly.
it by
Roughly.
a couple $100,000.
But Cycling Australia, BMX or MTB didn't have to pay for any of that.
No, haven't got it. And then on the human side, we've all been doing this. Some of us have got day jobs, so we do this as volunteers, and the CEOs realistically have been putting 75% of their time into it for the last 6 months.
Yeah, I can appreciate the amount of man hours, volunteer hours that have gone onto this, but I'm just overwhelmed by someone has obviously sat down in a consulting company who knows nothing about cycling, because I'm now more confused than I was beforehand. It's almost, if you excuse the joke, walking down the street and seeing someone of the opposite sex, or even the same sex, politically correctly these days, walking towards you, and you think, oh, wow, thinking they're a 10. But as they get closer and closer, you realise they're nowhere near a 10. They're like a 1 or a 2. Because I've got to tell you, that's how I feel at the end of that. So I just had 2 more questions. I currently follow, and this is at a real basic level, I currently follow Cycling Australia Instagram account. Me, along with 39 other thousand people. Will that Instagram account change?
I'm not qualified to answer that question. Can I just go back to your first question? I mean, I'm perplexed by that, mate, because there are people involved in this who know a lot about cycling. We've been thinking about this for 18 months. We've thought through every issue we can. I hope that's not a flippant comment. I hope that's not a piss take. I hope it's a genuine comment, because some people with real ability and a lot of time have put a lot of time into these slides. We've answered into this whole process. We've thought intimately about the issues. I'm not going to be flippant as the chairman who's proposing to shut down Cycling Australia. You won't find me making any flippant comments here. So that's the best we can do. And I hope your comment is flippant, not serious. But if you have ways to improve it, mate, come and hop in the team. Chuck in your time. Help us sharpen it. Because there are problems with the status quo, but a lot of people have put a lot of work into that. That's the best we can do. If you think it can be improved, hop sides of the fence, mate. Come and help us.
It's a fair comment, and I wasn't meaning to be flippant so much as just draw attention to it. Everyone kept on saying, 19 different organisations, but there actually aren't 19 different organisations. There are for you, but there aren't for us in the local cycling club. There's only really only one. Yeah, no, but there's only one organisation, and that's like Cycling New South Wales. Yeah. I think that's great, but yeah.
We're all cyclists. We're all cyclists.
So which Instagram account am I going to follow?
Whichever one you choose. Multiple.
Presumably AusCycling, John.
So AusCycling is only going to have the same content as Cycling Australia?
We should move on. Thank you, John. I'll give you a call tomorrow to get some socks.
They're no good anyway. Thank you. My name is Stephen Berveling. I'm a past president of Sydney Cycling Club. I like doing time trials if I can manage, and I like doing some solo time on the track as well. I fully understand that a board table with 19 people is really hard. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And some change for that would be a good idea in whatever form. I fully appreciate and I thank very, very much all of you for the time and effort that you have managed to get to this presentation all around Australia to this point. A number of you though, I've got 3 very short comments. The first one is a very short administrative, procedural, legal point, which will last about 30 seconds, and that is the suggestion about the appointment of 3 of the directors via Australian Sports Commission. And I just question, I know I need to get out on my bike more, okay? I just question the alignment and the interrelationship with that provision and complying with Clause 7 of the UCI Constitution. You can deal with that in due time. Of greater interest, very selfishly, Peter Beaumont, Glenn Villa and Graham Sears have heard me scream about the issue of diversity in cycling. And I'm very happy to come on board and talk to you about that later. Much more relevantly today, a number of you have said the clubs are core. And they are, and you can see from the comments that are happening here today that the clubs are core. And we can see that in your slides, particularly the yellow ones that came in early in the piece, about the benefits to individuals and the benefits to the clubs. However, I have an issue, a concern, and I'm hoping you can help, with the interrelationship with the core of clubs, which also aligns with the second organisation structure and design principle in the Ernst & Young report, how that fits with your flow of funds slide, number 23, which tells us the flow funds in, flows out, but it's only at the very bottom of that page that you say, by achieving efficiencies, AusCycling will also invest in additional areas such as infrastructure, safety advocacy, club development and national bike ed programs, which we would all welcome. But I read that line as it might happen if you achieve efficiencies, and it's an afterthought, which is totally contrary to it being a core. And I sincerely hope and ask you to put that into the top right yellow box of funds out. Because without funds showing to go out to clubs, with the greatest respect, you haven't quite got me across the line. But I appreciate it.
I'm happy to respond to that. I think the first couple we've taken on notice, and we'll come back to. With regard to the flow of funds, certainly by putting at the base of the page means no less a priority to us. They sit as high priorities and benefits that we want to see realised. They sit within what we, through the workshop that we had with the various collective states and territories and members of the mountain bike community, we talked about what are the things we want to achieve in the first 12 months. And those things sit very high on the agenda to do that. So the challenge for AusCycle as it gets established is to find efficiencies, but to find new monies and ways to achieve those outcomes. So that priorities to us, along with others, I'm sorry if it's reflected at the base of the page, but it doesn't reflect where it sits in our priority.
It's not reflected where it sits on the page either. It should be in that top right and yellow.
Yeah, I take your point. I think they were there as a highlight, and I think what the base of the flow of funds was more around showing and showcasing that there will be no diminished spending at state level or in state offices or anything like that, which has been a concern from before, but that we will continue to maintain and improve that and deliver those core services that need to happen to confirm that all funding that comes in from state governments will be spent 100% into those regions. Local sponsorship will be spent into those regions, but that we would like to then improve those services and collectively deliver those outcomes. Now, programs such as what we're talking about might be nationally based programs, but also delivered on a local office basis. So I think, you know, we could have put them in both boxes if we'd wanted to.
Yeah, Chris Ludlam from Southern Cross on road and Sutherland on mountain bike. We're a family of 4 and we've got 7 licences because me and the 2 boys ride mountain bike, and then we got 4 race licences. I guess that sort of points to yeah, some of the goals behind this is to just streamline that a bit. But my question is just on the funding model, because I don't like talking about the war, but a lot of the issues between Cycling Australia and the States has come out of money. So what degree of certainty do you place on the funding model? Because what I'm, and it's speaking as a family, it's a positive thing because our costs are going to come down for our licences. But if you've got more people involved, i.e. 90 rather than, I think, 82, and the licence costs are going to come down, then on day one, what funding deficit do you have when you're looking at AusCycling versus what we've got now around the States and in Cycling Australia. And presumably the $2.5 million kickstart, that's only a year one story. So what happens after that? So yeah, that's probably one for you, Steve.
Sure. So I guess the first point is that, as you mentioned, the system ends up, or starts off rather, $2.5 million better off through the injection from Sport Australia. And there's no doubt that we are investing some of that, that increase into pushing down the cost of participating in the competitive side of the sport. We have made some assumptions about the growth in membership that we expect from this model, and I think that they are relatively conservative assumptions. So at the moment we're only assuming 3% growth per annum. I actually think that's a very conservative assumption, particularly given the price of our rec product. Then we are assuming some improvement on the commercial side. I think from memory, we have nothing in year one. We assume about $250,000 of improvement in year two and about $350,000 in year three. And by the time that we get to the end of year three, that's recovering basically what we've sacrificed in membership price from the start. So when you look at the movement of net assets of AusCycle from the start through the end of year three, you do see a curve like that, but it gets back to about the starting point by the end of year three.
Ian Granger, Beaky Sport. Yeah, we started off asking about trust. I've got to state that unfortunately I'm one of the people who doesn't trust what the CEO has done in the past and what this model has brought. Can I ask one quick question? The $2.5 million, is that conditional on this model going ahead? So Sports Australia say they'll give you $2.5 million. Okay, so that's a bit like buying Manhattan from the Indians, isn't it? I mean, yeah, we're going to give you something or other as long as you give us this big lump. The other question,
not sure I agree with that comment, Ian, but anyway.
The other question, there's been a lot of talk in the last 12 months about an Ernst Young report that a number of us have been asking continually to see it, and we've been told we couldn't see it because it was commercial in confidence.
It's on the website.
Okay, so it's now available for us to see. Is that a complete, or is it a edited version?
The only information that's been removed is the names relative to the people that were interviewed, and that was a condition of the report that they would remain anonymous.
Okay, so it's a full report. Thank you. Is it a bit late that this has now been presented to us as fait accompli? We've got 2 months when we haven't had this discussion at grassroots level up until this opportunity today.
Just keep it really close.
So we started this conversation in March last year when I called Neil Cameron.
Just put it right up to you.
We started the presidents and the chair and the CEOs of the 3 organisations started to meet monthly through March, April, May, June of last year. The 3 NSOs agreed there was enough of an idea and enough merit to it. We would start working on the exercise, or we would start working on it actively. But that we needed resources. Someone asked a resources question. I think it was one of John's good questions. So the Sports Commission funded EY to write their report. They got that done in November. The 3 NSOs decided they liked the EY recommendation, so that we would go on the road. Steve and I hopped on the road, speaking just for this with a CA hat on. We went to every state, met with the board, invited clubs along to dinner. We were locked out of New South Wales. We were told we weren't welcome in New South Wales, and we couldn't meet with the clubs in the New South Wales. That was the New South Wales board's position. So we went to every state, had some fantastic dinners in some good pubs in Adelaide and WA and other places, and met with the full boards and up to 15, 20 club presidents. We've continued to work
we'll meet monthly through the course of this year. The presidents of the state organisations said to us in February, we still like where you're heading, and there has been some changes of some presidents. Can you go away and work on the detail? So some of us, started compromising our day jobs. Some of those who like Steve and Martin and Shane, who are running the organisation, started to allocate 75% of their time to this project. That took us through April, May, June of this year. We started this process a month ago. There is a lot of content here. It is a big idea. We can talk about it for at least, we've got another 8 weeks before our proposed timetable. We've pushed that timetable back as far as we can up against Christmas. Our gut instinct is 8 weeks of talking. 2 months of talking is enough. In some states, we've been actively talking to clubs since October last year. In some states, we haven't been allowed to. We can kick a... Peter, your predecessor, when we said, can we come, we met with your board and had dinner in the city last October, November. We asked if we could have a meeting with the club presidents, and Peter's answer was no. Our board's view is we would rather talk to the clubs, and you did not come and meet with the clubs. And other members on your board since then have confirmed that conversation, mate. So we asked repetitively in the back part of last year and early this year to come and meet with your clubs, and your board's position was Steve and I weren't allowed to come to that meeting.
So in this room, the first we heard about this was on Christmas Eve when we received CEO advice about one site. A number of us asked our board for information. We were told that wasn't available to us. We asked to see the document. We were told it wasn't available. So the majority of people in this room, I can say as president of a club, this is the first opportunity we've had to see this, and we're now seeing it as a rolled out complete package, finished, in place. If we don't do it, then $2.5 million doesn't come to that full support, etc., etc. There's a lot of pressure there when CA has had the opportunity through its membership base to contact us, and the CA has a president's Facebook page, and this has not been put out to anybody, as far as I know, in New South Wales to engage us and provide us access to information.
We've been issuing press releases since March or April. All I can say is we've put 18 months into it. We've tried to make it as collaborative as possible. Call South Australians and Victorians and others. I was standing up in front of a room of 40 club presidents in Victoria in October last year at their AGM. So some states have moved faster than others. I would love to have sat in this room last calendar year, but that wasn't possible.
You can understand why we're saying it's trust. The trust is not there at the moment because up to a couple of weeks ago, you didn't understand. And it's a big blind leap of faith. When we have this lot cycling.
Someone give this gentleman a microphone.
Phil Doe, Lidcombe Auburn Cycling Club. What I was saying is that, from what the other gentleman was intimating, is that we haven't heard anything about One Cycle. We haven't even heard about it changing names into AusCycling. Nothing has been pushed down through the clubs. The first we've heard of it, and I'm a committee member of our club, is just a couple of weeks ago. There's been no information. The only information that I've got yesterday is finding out from someone posting a story up on Cycling Tips, when my two associations weren't even providing me information. So to start the session today saying it is a leap of faith and we've got to have a lot of trust in you, and personally what you're saying makes a lot of sense. But that trust at the moment is just not there, and it's hard to take that leap of faith when we haven't been across everything to date.
So I can ask you a blunt question. We were invited to stand in front of all the club presidents and Board of Victoria last October. We flew around the country, we had dinner, this room and other states, flew to Queensland and repeated it. We weren't allowed to come to New South Wales. How does that reflect on us?
So What you're
What
saying,
more could we
what
have
you're
done?
saying to me is Cycling New South Wales stop you from talking to
I
us.
swear an affidavit, mate. We were told, don't come, you're not welcome. We will not convene our clubs to meet with you to talk about One Cycling. I'll swear an affidavit.
Thanks.
This is the first time we've been allowed to meet you because the Board of Cycling New South Wales has prevented us from doing it.
But what I
can't be
don't
any
understand
clearer.
is my licence is with Cycling Australia and my membership is actually with Cycling Australia.
On mic, please, if we get the mic up.
I'm now a bit of a gym rat. I've put on 7 kilos and increased my bench press by about 20 kilos as well since last April when I left the board. Sorry, Peter Beaumont, yes. But I felt I better come along tonight, as an interested spectator. Just on this particular point, the position that we had back in Christmas and earlier, when the first updates were being posted on the CA's website about One Cycling, and they were there. So for those who cruise CA's website, there was quite a lot of information. Well, not a lot. There was a briefing. The position we took, which I think is reasonable, is that until there was a substantial piece of information to share rather than the broad idea, there was not a lot of reason for a forum. And because at that time there was no information, and yes, the Ernst & Young report did get delivered, but at that point it wasn't able to be circulated, so again that wasn't able to be delivered. So convening a meeting to talk in generalities wasn't thought to be a lot of value. And on the board there was a lot of debate about the merits of this proposal, and personally, and this is my personal position, is that now that the presentation in full is available, it's something that all the clubs need to consider very, very carefully. This is a 1 in 100-year opportunity for each of the clubs to really give this a lot of thought and to think about the future, not reflect on the past. The past doesn't have much there for us. We've got to think about the future. It takes about 10 weeks to decide on who is the Prime Minister of our country and who will govern for the next 3 or 4 years. I don't think, therefore, we should be too intimidated by digesting the material we've got now over the next 8 weeks or so. So that's sort of the context I'd simply give you. It is an important decision, so do take it seriously and do ask all the questions you want. And now that we have the full presentation, which frankly I think hit my email box about 4 days ago, I haven't personally digested it myself. And going back to my earlier point, I'm not on any club committee. I just go to the gym these days and lift weights. But for those who are empowered to make a vote, then yeah, think about it very carefully.
Well said, Peter.
Given that we've got the current president of New South Wales here, should we not make statements?
If you wish, yeah. Yep. We're trying to keep the floor open to everyone, but that was well said. We're not dwelling on the past. We've got as much now. We're complaining about having too much information. Before it was not enough, so at least you've got it. Yeah, but that was explained as to why.
We are Cycling Australia members as well, so it can be disseminated at a national basis.
Mountain bike and BMX, yep.
A little bit of order on the floor, boys. If you want us to ask a question, get the microphone. So, my name's Neil Cameron. I started this process with Duncan Murray, past president of BMX Australia, also a past state president and a past club president, a fool for volunteering all my life. The question of trust is a great one. Now, she'll be embarrassed, but my wife worked for Cycling Australia for 18 years. And I saw wonderful people do wonderful things, and I saw a bunch of less than wonderful people do a lot of less than wonderful things. The structure, the infrastructure that we sit upon or in place upon us in this sport, in BMX, in cycling, allows for a lot of people who are not competent, who are not skilled,
who have motivations that are questionable to run things in whatever direction they like. And what we have is a bunch of headless chooks getting around. I've been in clubland. I know that at clubland you get help from state if you go and make some noise, but you really don't want it. You want to work your guts out. You look down to your members. You don't look up to your state with your hand up. I know as running a state, I look down to my clubs and I work with my clubs. I ignored BMX Australia when I was a state president because I did not like the president that was currently in place. So personalities and infrastructure allow for chaos. And that's basically what we have. There's a lot of issues here about information flow. Well, I know from being president of BMX Australia that when I sent an email to the states, the clubs never heard about it. The information flow doesn't work within this sport. I doubt if it works within mountain bike, and they've got a unitary structure. It sure as hell doesn't get from national to state to club in a proper manner because we don't have proper mechanisms and we're not professionals, we're all volunteers. So when it comes down to trust, did I trust Cycling Australia? And by the way, I am a member of Cycling Australia. I'm a silly old fool now in Lycra, occasionally. I didn't know the man, never met him. But I looked at the fact that he's not up there, and mountain bike are not up there trying to take over my sport. They're not there trying to screw me over or empty my pockets. They are doing this work because of their passion for what they want to do. Now, everybody's passionate about what they do, and some are misguided about it, some are good at it. These blokes are good at it. So I trusted Cycling Australia. Duncan and Steve, the previous president of Mountain Bike, and Shane, I trusted those people because I assessed them as having their heart in the right place, and they were not out to make a mess of something. They were there to learn lessons from the messes that have been made in the past, and there's been a lot of incompetence in the past, but they were there to try and turn this sow's ear into a silk purse. This is the best chance we've got for it.
That we can applaud. Now, you did say that there were a bunch of questions on this side. Was BMX as well? Or no, sorry, current pres, mountain bike.
I'm happy to go, but if there's anyone from mountain biking or BMX who wants to have a go first, then...
You've got the mic.
Okay. As long as it comes back. My name's Graham Scully, and I'm not a president or a former superstar or anything like that. I'm a member of Mountain Bikes Australia, and I ride with my son, and I've only been doing it for a few years. And when I look around this room, I see a very interesting demographic, because I think most of you are probably at least my age, and I'm over 50, okay? And what I think about what these guys are trying to achieve, and I think your vision, the vision that you all have, is just commendable, and the way you've articulated it tonight is just amazing. I think you've done a fantastic job. But I'm speaking as somebody who's over 50 and who works in the corporate world. So I understand the language that you're talking extremely well. But when I think of my son, who's 18, and he's a member, and when I think of his mates, who are members, and they ride bikes, okay? They don't know what cycling is, they ride bikes, all right? So how are you going to communicate this message, which is very understandable to most of us in this room? How are you going to communicate that message effectively to get those people on board? Because they are the future of what you guys are aiming to do with the vision, the amazing vision that you've got now.
Who wants to go?
You're right, that is our challenge. I think our first challenge, though, is to communicate to the people in this room, many of whom are, you're right, over 50,
who are the club presidents and are the ones who are going to be on the road and track and the BMX stage, the ones who ultimately make the call. It would be nice if Shane probably might not agree, but because there is a challenge with having individual member voting, but the club presidents in this room are going to be the ones that make the call, and that is, it's a big responsibility, because I do think that this is a turning point, a potential turning point for the activity of cycling in Australia. I think as we get our act together, we will be in a much better position then to communicate with a broader spectrum of the cycling community and build our membership. I think Mountain Bike has been great in demonstrating how that works. They've built their recreational membership base pretty aggressively in recent years, and that's that's shown in the overall growth of their membership. So I think we can learn a lot from them.
It's a real challenge. We need to communicate to so many demographics across all of it. We need to find relevance to the women who ride bikes. We need to communicate to people who ride adaptive or para. We need to make sure that we provide a relevance and engagement with all. How do we do it? We need to try and make this transition not scary. We need to show that your son is not going to, that what he enjoys doing today, riding his bike, is not going to change, but what we hope that we can do is provide him with new opportunities of where he can ride his bike. And if he has other aspirations, that he's got opportunities for support and assistance to achieve those. So how do we do it? We've got to keep pushing the brand, the excitement of riding a bike, and continue to try and just get out this proposal in front of as many people as we can. And that comes from what we're doing now. It comes from the website. It comes from hopefully speaking to people like yourself who can go back and inform these people and give them the information that is of what we're trying to do. So it's a collective process, and we've just got to keep talking and telling people what we're trying to do, because the greatest thing here is that you can easily find holes in what we're proposing. Let's try and get people to understand the real benefits of what we're proposing, so that they can send that message and reflect that message to the broad communities who will vote these decisions.
Ready?
Hi, I'm Adam Farrer. I'm the president of the Dulwich Hill Bicycle Club. Just a couple of comments first. Dulwich Hill is a club that has tried for the past 15 years to focus very much on getting the balance between participation and racing right. And one of the results of that was that over that period, we grew from almost being non-existent to being one of the largest clubs in the state. So I think there's a message, a positive message there, that I think resonates with the project. I'd also say that on the advocacy side, again, because you start to have that momentum, we've been able to run an advocacy project. It did go to the Transport Minister, who launched the results and put them in the rail networks around the state. So it can be done, and it can be done from the grassroots as well. I think those are fairly important messages to take away. It is true that 8 weeks isn't long in some contexts. Is quite a fair time in some contexts. But although we've already begun the process of trying to engage our members, it's our members that will tell us how we end up voting, just as it is the membership of Cycling New South Wales the clubs that will tell Cycling New South Wales the same thing. So I think that we're going to have a bit of a struggle to get that message and those details out to all our membership, but we've begun, and we intend to give it a pretty damn good shot. So again, I hope that's a positive message. I've really got 2 questions. One's been made a bit simpler by the beginning of the explanation about the financial model, but I wonder whether that financial model is available. And I guess I have a particular reason for asking that. Our members will want to know that the resources available to them from what's currently their state body are going to remain available to them, and they're not simply going to go into a pool, and it may well be the best thing for cycling, but they're going to ask the question, does it go into back to us, or does it go into a pool that can get leached out of our particular area of interest? Not saying that's right, I'm just saying they want to know the answer. And can we see some modelling that will help that? My second question, though, is, I guess, a very pragmatic one. I've been involved, too, in trying to turn a federated industry body into a national industry body. And it has happened now, after I've left, but it's happened, but it took quite some years because it's a thing which can easily fall over. So my question is, what if some of the states or some of the organisations don't pass the appropriate resolutions, particularly around the assets and the finances? What happens to them? Will they sit outside a new national body? And what happens to your model if they're not part of it?
Frankie.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. Adam, thanks for the question. I'll tackle the modelling one, and then I'm conscious Martin hasn't fielded any questions, so I'm going to flick the mic over to him. I think the underlying assumption of the model at the moment is that we do pull the funds from the various disciplines, including the 2.5 that comes in from Sport Oz. But also the underlying assumption is that the business plans that are already in place at state level are continued on, and so the amount of expenditure that happens in each state is similar to what happens today. So ultimately, a good proxy for the amount of benefit that comes from the combination is the membership in a given state. And New South Wales is, I think, the highest membership on a combined basis.
In terms of what will happen if individual states decide to stay out, I suppose that situation occurs if we get the 75% approval for it. So there may be 1 or 2 states within the federated models that may vote no, yet there's a sufficient number of states voting yes for the proposal to go ahead. So at that stage, obviously we respect the decision that's been made by the majority of the voting members, and AusCycling will move ahead. At that stage, I suppose the states that have voted no then have their own decision to make, whether they wish to come into AusCycling, and we certainly really hope that they do. One of the things that this is about aggregating our numbers and cycling and being stronger as one. If there's states staying outside, then obviously that just weakens it a little bit. So we certainly hope that doesn't happen. But as we've said, this is up to the members. And if the members decided that as a state they wanted to continue operating as a state body outside of AusCycling, then that's something, once again, that we have to respect. And that is a decision for the members, and they can do that. Obviously, they don't have a place within AusCycling as a state body. That's not the structure that we're looking at. So they can continue operating, they can continue running the events that they run, the clubs can continue what they're doing, and they can operate as they've been doing. They'll have no national body, and they would have to replicate the services that are being provided by the national body at the current situation. We would certainly like to continue discussions with them and try to work through whatever challenges and whatever issues that they had so that they can come into the fold. And that's a process that would continue. So we don't wish to exclude them forever. Let's work through it, bring them into the fold. In terms of individuals and clubs, they have a decision to make as well. Even if the state stays out, clubs and individuals can still join up with AusCycling. So they can become part of the national body and partake in all the activities and get all the benefits that being part of the national body offers.
G'day, gents. My name's Bluey Seaton. I'm here representing the Board of BMX New South Wales. I'm also a member of the Castleville BMX Club. I had a few questions. To be honest with you, I think they're insignificant now, just based on the room and the comments from the room. And there's obviously a clear divide in the room over the separate disciplines, and I believe that that's where the problem lies, the divide. If we sit and look at these guys up here and what they're doing and the passion they have for it and the belief they have in it, who's wrong? Those guys or us down here that haven't got the knowledge and haven't put the input into it to understand what it is? Now, I've attended this one today, and I've also taken the time to watch two of the other live streams that have taken place around the country over the last week. And as you said, Darren, when you initially spoke, when Neil came to you with it, and you said, well, hang on a minute, because the default is no if something's going to change. So what we need to do is we need to take time to listen, learn and understand. And I'd like to think myself, and I've spoken to other members of our association of BMX over the past week or so that have asked me questions that, you know, a period of time ago, I was where you were at, Darren, where, no, because as I say, that's the default. But when you take time to listen to it and read and take your own personal agenda and own personal fears off the table and listen to what's being said and understand it. And I understand the guys from Cycling New South Wales. I understand you've got, everybody thinks different about this. And this is the problem. We need to come together as one. Otherwise, we're just going to be where we're at now in 15 or 20 years' time, and we're all going to be battling for the same dollar, all of us, instead of it all coming under one banner. Because if you have a look at that slide where it showed what the last funding was around the country to the different sporting organisations, and some of them are minnows compared to this. Cycling as a whole, not just cycling like BMX and everything, as a whole, when you look at the Olympic history in this sport and the higher level, there's only one sport that's more successful than anything on wheels at the Olympics and the higher level of Commonwealth Games as well, and that's swimming. Now, swimming's on there, but so are a heap of other things. So, if this comes together, I believe that in year 2, 3, 4 and 5, we will reap the benefits of the funding that will come from this because of the size that we are and the sports we are. We're Australian sports is what we are, and Australians love to do it. And get them off the computer games and get them out into cycling and give them each discipline under one licence that they can all go and do. My kids do BMX, but if my sons come to me and go, you know what, now can we go do some mountain biking? Yes, they can. You know why? Because they'll have a licence, they'll be insured, they're going through bush tracks, not a worry. So, guys, I can only speak for myself, but this is the way forward because of the simple fact that I believe in the time that these people out here have put into it. And my understanding is it hasn't been 18 months. This has been ongoing for probably the last decade, and we've finally got traction. And why does the vote have to be in 8 weeks' time? You know why? Because we're just going to procrastinate for longer and come up for reasons why not to do it. Let's just get it sorted, guys, and move on.
Well said, Bluey. That funding slide that you mentioned, what was really striking for me is the number of professional sporting organisations, football clubs that are very big balance sheets, making lots of money as businesses, and they're still getting $10 and $15 million worth of government funding, and we're getting a small amount from AusSport for our high performance program. Well, it's a significant amount from AusSport, but we're being trumped by individual clubs within professional sporting bodies. We've got a lot of work to do.
Scott,
can I just respond to that? Sorry, mate, I missed your name. Bluey. And to also comment that Rupert made earlier about the fact that this is a fast process and you'd like more time. And I think your comment, Bluey, I think you won't be surprised to know I think you're spot on, and Rupert, you won't be surprised to know that I think you're wrong. The reality is, as I said, this started 18 months ago. All the presidents of all the state organisations and Steve and I have had 18 conference calls in a row. 2 hours, an hour or two every Monday morning for 18 months, we've been talking about this. This is the second time this group have been on a national roadshow. We did it in the back half of last year and early late this year. We're doing it again. When we first started talking, the notion of getting the 3 NSOs doing this was incomprehensible. It's never happened before in the history of the sport. And it just doesn't happen overnight. So we formed this relationship, we formed this idea, we've designed what we've designed, and I've spent my life doing transactions in the private equity space. This is the sort of the emotionally most complicated thing I've ever done. At sort of 19 times 1 transaction's hard in a sort of in an emotionless corporate world, in a highly passionate not-for-profit world. This is the most complicated thing I've ever done. We couldn't be here a day earlier. We could have been here having sort of version 1 of this as we did in other states pre-Christmas, but we could. These slides have existed for 2 or 3 weeks, and no one on this platform has the intellectual, physical or emotional energy to have got here any faster. We do decide who runs the question in 8 weeks, who runs the country in 8 weeks. We've got 8 weeks here, and we need to make a call. It's not that complicated. There's huge bodies of information that sit behind this. And also, to Bluey's point about saying no, we all need to make the decision to say yes or no slowly. Because if we say no, we're saying we prefer the status quo, and all I've heard is grumbling. I'm actually quietly surprised by this process. I thought Road and Track would go yes, because I've just heard grumbling for 30 years about the administration of cycling. I thought the BMXers would struggle because they're strong and they're vibrant and they've got kids and they've got money, and I didn't know about mountain bike.
BMX families don't have money. Bike shops have money, not BMX families.
Well, the organisations do. Your organisations are all financially healthy. And we've got to say no slowly, mate. Like, if we vote for the status quo, we've all got to be the people that lead this sport, and you're one of the people that lead this sector. I've got to stop using the word sport. Someone made that point earlier. It's a very good point. The people who lead this sector, if we're going to vote for the status quo, yeah, that's fine. Vote for the status quo. We'll all go and do other things with our lives, and the next generation of muppets who decide to be cycling administrators can have another crack. But vote for the status quo slowly.
So we have gone over why nots in the past a lot. Yep, sure. Where's the mic? Is that okay if we...
Okay, so
All right, we'll go to Robin after next. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Peter.
So can you get the slide? Can you get slide 19 up there, please? It'd be really helpful for me.
Yeah, let's see if I can do that.
Okay. So it's Brian Crawford, from Newcastle Cycle Club. If I can say, I think one cycling, the one model, so the one licence, the whole AusCycling. I think it's the future. It is the way to go. But I have reservations.
Just hold the mic up closer. Yeah, thanks, mate.
Okay, thanks, Scott. I think it's the future, but I have reservations up here. So, okay, I'm not over my 50s. You're right. I'm not over. He's right. There's a lot of. Okay. Right in front of my face.
That's it.
Ooh,
Yep,
that is loud.
When if you can hear yourself through the speakers, then you know it's working.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm a bit concerned. So I've been the coach, I've been the commissaire, the volunteer. Pretty much covered all the roles now. I've also worked at Cycling New South Wales. So I've seen the insides of the Cycling Australia. I've worked with Joe. Joe was fantastic. Yes, Margaret, you're putting your hand up. So I've worked with a lot of them. They had their heart in the right place, as you said before. However, Cycling Australia is a cancer on our sport. There's a culture in there. It's born to rule culture. They want to dominate everything. They want to crush the states. And I worry about BMX and MTBO. But it's a culture. It's not Joe or Margaret. It's a culture in there. It's not something they want to do.
Brian, can I just jump in? You do realise that this is Cycling Australia disbanding?
Yes. I'm so happy to hear that we agree on that.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, I heard you say it before.
What's your question? What's your point?
We're moving a lot of the same staff coming over, and this model here is very similar. In fact, if anything, we're taking out the power up here. We're taking out the boards that have been protecting us from the machine in the past. We're taking out the autonomy that the members did have. They used to be able to vote here, have some power here. We're getting rid of that, putting them around here, and so these people up here, not the people here. These people here used to tread all over the states. They trample on them, just dominate.
In the past, we're talking in the past, aren't we? This is a new model with all sports represented.
Isn't that great?
How do we know it's going to be easier? Just let the man talk, please.
Exactly. How do we know it's going to be the same people? How do we get rid of this culture? So my questions for Martin, I think it was Duncan. How do we know the CA, the staff, not your board here that you're agreeing with, how do we know that the staff, the machine, aren't just going to trample all over your members? What do we have in place here for the next lot of CEOs, the next 10, 20, well, we've been going for, 130 years? What are we going to have in place to not just wipe out the members with this whole thing? I'm concerned about your members.
I appreciate your concern for my members, and I'm sure that they'll speak for themselves when the time is right. We've considered this from a mountain bike perspective. We're currently a Unitarian structure. We're more than comfortable to present and propose and suggest this model to our members. We believe it offers much greater opportunities than if we were to sit on our hands and stay where we are today. Our sport is growing, our workforce is strong, our workforce is good, but it only has a certain level of capacity. And we're quite comfortable to sit before our members and recommend this proposal. We believe that the strength of this model that we're proposing puts the voting rights and the responsibility back to the clubs to keep the board and the organisation accountable. And the state boards that you refer to that are moving really are being replaced simply by state advisory councils that make up representatives of all the sports. So from a mountain bike perspective, I appreciate your concern for our sport. Our members will decide, but we are more than happy as an organisation to recommend and put this proposal before them.
Is the machine in there, not the board, not the three people we're putting in the three CEOs?
Look, from BMX perspective, once again, we're very happy with it. We believe that this gives clubs a much greater input into the organisation. At the moment, you've got to go through a separate organisation in order to get to your national body. Here you've got a local office that has a direct line into head office if they need it, into the CEO. We've got a situation where we've said that the local offices are the lifeblood and the focal point of the organisation and providing the services that need to be provided to clubs and members. You know, at the moment, if you want to get a message through to the national body, that's a difficult process because they're different organisations. You'll have a local office general manager who will be consulted and included in all the major discussions that are happening. And well, you might shake your head, but that's the.
The current ones have power. These ones won't have any power. And they won't have any assets either, because you're going to take the assets off them. They're advisory of how to
Move on. Robin.
Hello everyone, my name is Robin Sprouster. I'm a National Commissaire. I'm the New South Wales State Handicapper. And I just have a question because I've been doing a fair amount of reading lately because of all of this, and I've actually listened to every roadshow. There's, on the Sports Australia website, there is a tab called Governance, and there's something called One Management. And on that website, under One Management, it actually says, and excuse me for a minute while I read, critically, the one management operating model embraces the federated structure and seeks to harness opportunities for operational improvements within that system without requiring structural or constitutional change by any entities. So why I read that, I want to know. I understand what you're all saying, but one comment was made, we're not reinventing the wheel, but we kind of are. We have our state officers. We have a CEO. We have the best CEO in Australia, by the way, in Mr. Sears, and he has done so much for cycling in New South Wales since he's been on board. Why can't we keep them? Why can't we keep that and just the CEOs or the board report in to the top structure? Why can't all the groups join together, do all these wonderful things that you're proposing that we can do, but instead keep the federated states? So that's really my question. I'm also concerned about commissions. Now, we've got several commissions in New South Wales. We've got our Tech Commission, which is excellent. We have a Women's Commission, we have a Masters Commission, we have a Competitions Commission. What happens to those voices, like commissaire appointments, etc.? What happens to those if this defederated model goes forward? Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. I'll spend a little bit of time, I think, just responding to the first one about the federated structure, and I think it's fair to say that we have two organisations that currently exist in the federated structure, and the one management program that you refer to looks at a sport that is a single sport that is in federated structure. Within that model, and I'm not sure how many people are aware of how that model is actually prefaced and works, it actually is built on a very similar concept. If you take one discipline, you actually move, the one management model proposes that you move across all your assets and liabilities into the one singular organisation, including your workforce, and therefore all those staff that are in local and regional, in your state offices, actually work as part of a national workforce. That's what you've read? That's not the unitary model, that's the one management model, and I can let Sport Australia speak on that. Now, in the situation where we're talking with the three disciplines, MTBA is a unitary model. We service the country nationally. We do not have state recognised bodies. Our constitution doesn't provide for that. So you would be proposing, under your suggestion, that MTBA members would choose to go back and create a federated model and establish independent state bodies in all 8 territories. This is the AusCycling model. The federated model that you talk about does not work in the MTBA world. So you would be asking MTBA members to do you would have to create a whole hybrid of all variants. Do you create a situation where you have one entity that sits at the top and you have 8 state and territories from BMX and 8 state and territories from road and track and 17,000 individual members who, as the structure is today, collectively voting on the national body? Or do you ask mountain bike members to go backwards and create a situation where they have a federated structure and are paying for a level of service at a federated body? So there are a lot of challenges about bringing that model forward. I'm happy for Matt to talk if he wishes on.
We haven't worked in detail on the commissions, but there's no reason why state level commissions couldn't assist with the management team running the business at a state level if they thought that was useful. And as for keeping your great staff, we couldn't agree more. I think there was a question then from the front row about who's going to pay. They're already paid for.
If this happens,
Should we grab the mic?
New South Wales go over to AusCycling.
Yes, we already answered that question before.
Yeah, I know, it's on your sheet. So the initiatives that New South Wales Cycling are implementing now with their junior programs, who's going to fund all that? And then when we hand these assets over to you guys, or this new body, how do we know it's going to work? We don't.
It works now.
What works now? Cycling Australia.
the state body, and basically the employees that are working now in the state office will continue to do so.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the assets that the states have now.
Okay, so this is a question, I think, again, that goes to trust. And there have been a lot of comments on social media about CA's financial management, etc. I think it's an important one to address. It is common knowledge, and we don't try to resile from the fact that 2014 and before, CA lost a considerable amount of money, and that's reflected in the debt that's on the balance sheet now. It's also important to note that the board completely changed after that period of time, and the senior management has completely turned over in that period of time. So CA now is not CA then. It's also very relevant to note that CA has traded profitably every year since that time. So I think the comments about CA financial management are actually misplaced, and they're historical comments that are true about history, they're not true about today. So tell me the basis upon which it's not right, because if we want to talk about, you know, facts, let's talk about facts.
We'll finish this off, because if it's off mic, it's not going online. People at home aren't hearing the questions.
All right.
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
Brett Barnes. I'm from actually BMX and mountain bikes. I got 20 years of both licenses, and I'm happy with both of them. Thanks, guys.
I
love your work.
Tracks too, and Steve Hodges.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, and that brings me to my question. Is we've got a lot of questions about the recreational side of things, and I think that's a really probably a big mover for you guys, because you got Bicycle Network with Steve, you've got Bicycle New South Wales, you've got We Ride Australia, you've got all these guys that are actually starting to move in political circles. How are you guys going to attract that recreational component for BMXers? So I know we've got a coach over here who wants to know if she can coach recreational riders, and how, especially you, Shane, like you got thousands of guys, you've got to try and, I think Nick over here, one of the biggest mountain bike clubs in New South Wales, and how many heaps recreational? Garigal Gorillas, massively recreational. So what's in AusCycling for like BMX coaches, recreational Garigal, recreational Green Valley? So why am I going to vote yes if all I am is a recreational rider?
Yeah, look, in terms of questions like can you coach recreational riders? Absolutely, of course. As we've said, the recreational sector is an important part of this organisation moving forward. So it's not an area that BMX has worked in previously, but as we said earlier, mountain bike and CA have started to move in that direction, and they've been making some great progress in that. So we need to look at the moment at what's been done in those areas to start that process and use that as a base to move forward with. And then started having a look at what are the services that a recreational rider would like. They're only going to pay for their membership if we're providing things. So is it insurance? Is it information? Is it about tips about how to ride, about where to ride? Just feeling like they're included in information and communications that are going out so that they understand they're part of a wider community? Is it about preferential pricing deals that can be done with equipment suppliers and those sorts of things? So they're some of the things that we're looking at, but I'll hand over to Shane, because they've done a lot of work in that area in the last couple of years.
Thanks, Martin. Look, how do we attract rec riders? We put a value offering on there, but what we want to do about it is it's about providing people with information. It's about helping provide people with access. It's about providing education opportunities if that's what they want, and that's where it fits into the coaching and the skills instructors. I think we now have in excess of 1,000 around the nation that are working in mountain bike. It's about giving you access to resources, and some of this doesn't have to be tangible. It can just be information. It can be about destination, tourism. Where do you go for your ride? Where do you get involved? It's about teaching you skills. We give you insurance, and we give you an identity and a voice. So, we're talking about fees of $50 to $80 for the recreational rider, and it's about us ensuring that we create some value packages of which maybe all of it means something to you, but some of it means something to you. So, and what we need to do though, is we continue to speak in the bubble. And we've talked about this for many years. I don't know how many years it was, but I sat in a whole forum with the CA states and CA at the time about how do we grow our membership? How do we get our numbers up and the participation and realise what the opportunity really is? And one of the biggest things was we're all too small. We could not speak outside our bubble. There's no one in the media that we can go and get mainstream media coverage or exposure really for a lot of our athletes. And even to talk about our causes, we're relying on community and community newspapers. So we need to do better at that. You know, I don't think that AFL would attract the number of people if it wasn't on the TV every second night and had all these other subsidiary shows and 1,500 journos or whatever it is writing stories about it. We need to be in a bigger we need a bigger platform, a bigger voice, so that we can broadcast our message, the excitement and the opportunities that cycling does to rec members to encourage them to join. How do I get them to vote? We just keep plugging away, and we just keep trying to broadcast the message, and we try and sell the benefits of what this opportunity presents to people. And Mountain Bike Australia will continue to communicate directly with its members. We're providing as much resource and information as we can, and we're relying on people like yourself who've come, taken the time to learn, and that you can then broadcast that message, because the greatest word of mouth is the greatest recommendation we can get.
We've just got a cluster in the middle here and we'll come across to you.
Hello, I'm going to try and bring some cross-discipline love. I'm a BMX club president for Sydney BMX, club volunteer and club coach. I also race road bike with Randwick, as does my son as well. So my question is regarding volunteers. So there's been a lot of talk about volunteers and what that structure looks like. In the BMX community, the volunteer memberships are free. And the club official is also free as well. We're a club of 170 members, and we have 29 licensed volunteers at the moment, which are required to run club racing and also provide assistance at state level as well. If we don't have those in place, we're not insured to race. So I have heard rumours, and I've been trying to get across most of the questions over the last week in terms of, are the volunteers going to be charged? Because that model certainly wouldn't work in BMX land. I know from Randwick, I stand in the Squircle sometimes with a cape on, and I don't have to have any affiliation in terms of a membership, volunteer license for that. So I want to know how that works across disciplines. Can I go and hold a flag at the local mountain bike club if I wanted to, or can the Randwick members come and hold a flag at my one of my berms? Second question would be, also on that as well, would be, I think we spent about 1,300 man-hours maintaining our track early part of this year. Neil Cameron would attest to that. He attended a few of the working bees and said it was rather neurotic. I would say attention to detail. Club governance as well. I'd like to know affiliation fees. I know it's probably a bit of detail, but we can't be the sensitivity analysis and some of the forecasting revenues. We don't want to be slugged with additional affiliation fees, bearing in mind we've got tracks to maintain and all that sort of stuff. We have probably larger expenses than a crit track at Randwick, for example, because we've got dirt tracks to maintain. Club constitutions, obviously we need to know what's happening in club constitutions. And then my final question will be licensing in clubs. I know we've got multiple race categories now on one license, so you can hold a $250 race license and go and race anywhere now, plus club fees. So again, we don't want to be the Sydney BMX member doesn't want to rock up to Randwick and race on a crit circuit, or can he? Or clearly on a road bike, not on the BMX. So I want to understand how that works, because we rely on that club membership fee, and currently in the BMX model, it's built into that fee. So for a $150 license as it currently stands in BMX, we receive $25 of that, and the member does not see any of that. He doesn't have to go up to the club and get slugged another $25. So I think that's it. I appreciate we've all got to go training in the morning, so I'll hand the mic back.
Okay, I'll work through your questions. Volunteer memberships will be free, irrespective. If you're a volunteer, you're a volunteer, and that's what the club affiliation provides for. It provides for insurance to cover your volunteers. So if you turn up and do it at BMX, turn up and do it at mountain bike, turn up and do it at a road or a track, you'll be covered as a volunteer without paying a fee. With regard to club constitutions, there should be no change to a club constitution unless your constitution currently reflects your federation. But if you don't reflect that, there will be no change to your constitution. With regard to club affiliation fees, we're still finalising the detail on that. In mountain bike, it's $185 a year. In some of the road and track organisations, depending on the state, it's upwards of the high 500s. We're working on a model not to see that increase in any way, but we're working on a model that will be scalable, probably based on the number of members within a club, but it'll be about 3 scales. So we're working our way through that. Certainly won't be, you know, above what historically should have been charged. And the last question is around BMX or club memberships, because you can now join multiple clubs. And it's an interesting question because people have all of a sudden gone, I can join that club over there because they're $5 cheaper than that club over there, so I'll lose my support. Club is about community, and there are many ways that within your club, and I don't need to tell you how to run your club, you do it all better than we would, but it's about finding incentives and value. You know, do you offer a discount to people who are club members when they race? I don't know why you would leave a BMX club to join a mountain bike club to save $10. That doesn't seem very loyal to the experience, and certainly from our experience, club membership is something that most people are very loyal about. But it does come back to the club to look at how it incentivises its members and the support that it gives them. We would like to see that more people will support more clubs ultimately through this process, because you know, there was a situation in Adelaide where a gentleman said, no one's going to join my track club, and someone in the back of the room put their hand up and said, well, under the CA world I can only join one club that races on the track. I can now join the one that I'm a member of, but I can also join your club under this format, and I would do that. So I think we're looking at everyone bolting, but instead we should be looking at maybe there'll be more support that way. And when you reference about $150 fee and $25 comes back to your club, ultimately when the model is in place and operating as a transactional service, it'll be very similar as it is today. You will pay, there will be the base fee of what you choose to do with the AusCycling membership or licence. You'll choose your club or clubs. That fee will be included, and you'll make one payment, and the transaction to the club will be made directly as it is today. So that process, we can't determine exactly what all the different variants are, but that will be the process that has existed in the past.
Well, let's go on, yep, down here.
Hi, I'm Larry Morgan-Thomas, also from Dulwich Hill Bicycle Club, and I was on the CA board in 2013, and so I commend you for where you are today, because when I was there in 2013, I couldn't imagine that you could bring it together, and there was a lot of pressure from the Australian Sports Commission. So, like, really well done on bringing that. I'm encouraged by the cohesiveness of the presentation and of all of you. My question is, well, I have 2 questions. One is about for clubs. Can you make it real for me about what the benefits are to clubs? I've run industry bodies for in the non-profit world, and I know that in order to find out what your members want, you kind of got to ask them. As a former club president, I know what I wanted from my state cycling body. Often didn't get it, but it would be. I could tell you what some of those things are, and some of those things are guidance notes and things like that. I didn't get that out of the presentation. I got. Maybe you'd get better back office admin stuff, not very sexy, but the things that you really struggle with on a day-to-day things are finding out how things work at the higher level. So I'd kind of want to know what's the process you'd go about finding out what the clubs want, because that would give us as a club, I think, some confidence that we were actually going to realise the benefits. And that would be the same for any club, so whatever discipline it is. My second question relates to one of the things that Robin said about in New South Wales we have a women's commission. Cycling Australia used to have a women's commission. I don't know about the other disciplines. There are a lot of men here today and not very many women. That kind of reflects our sport, and the only way that we're going to change some of those things is by some positive action towards getting more women involved in the sport and recreation, how we think about that. So what are the plans for that? Because I think that's also something that's a selling point that I haven't heard much about.
Okay. Feels like I'm getting a few other questions tonight. With regard to benefits for clubs and to make it real, that's what I took from what you were talking about. We didn't touch on things like guidance, and we didn't touch on the resources we're going to make available, but the endeavour will be, and Mountain Bike Australia, I believe, have done somewhat a reasonable job at trying to improve the resources that we provide for clubs. And what we want to do here is, first, we need to get beyond this decision, and we need to work with you about parts of the implementation that really mean tangible outcomes and benefits to you. It'd be great if you could spend some time and tell us what is important to you. What are those things that you're looking for? And we want this open dialogue. We don't want confrontational dialogue. We want open dialogue. We talked about wanting to work together to improve a collective future. We've talked about things in our forums around making templates, resources. If you're looking how to do a grant application, that there's guidance on how to do that, and that we've made resources and staff available to meet with you and talk to you on that. We want to make significant amount of data available for you. Mountain Bike Australia has 5 years of collective data of membership sales per month, per region. We can give you that information, and that's what we want to do on a national basis, and then take that down to community level, so you've got real empirical information that you can use in what you're trying to do. We want to collaborate with all the different groups, hear their stories of what they're doing well, and then we want to broadcast and share those. There might be some great initiatives that are happening in BMX or road that could benefit mountain bike and vice versa, but we don't share that knowledge and that information. It might be coming out of Tasmania, it might be coming out of Northern Territory, and we want to be able to have forums that allow that cross information. On, probably some of the less sexy things we've talked about, we've looked at going along and saying, is there an opportunity for us to try and work to create a digital platform that allows clubs to manage their finances in one set, so that your books are kept in an area that when you change treasurers or things like that, you don't have to go and find all your records. This is really a bit of an open opportunity for clubs to tell us what's equally important to them, so that we work towards delivering those priorities and outcomes that are of value. And with regard to the comments around commissions, they're vital. I think one of the roles that we've identified in the workforce is the need to have diversity and inclusion. We don't have that now, and I agree with you. I think there are these needs for all these commissions, and we could have created a chart that would look be enormous. But I think we also need, through the transition process and the discussions that we have, to understand what commissions are important, because you don't want to create a commission just for the sake of a commission. They actually have to have a purpose, and they actually have to work towards bringing about tangible outcomes. So, Mountain Bike Australia only have a couple, but we make sure that what we do with those commissions is that they really reflect our community's needs, and we consult backwards and forwards. But I think there's huge opportunities, and we would be looking to protect as many of those as we can to the benefit of the members.
And particularly the women one, because I am obviously focused on that.
Absolutely, and look, the organisation will embrace all the gender equity balances. They'll be seeking to have 40-50% of its board and membership in that vein, and its workforce. So we will be looking to include all those things. There's, the challenges around diversity and inclusion don't just stem with women. It stems across the whole sector of the community. So it's very important.
Yep, over back.
Hi, Ian Ganderton, Sutherland-based mountain biker. Ride a bit with Pete. Crash on a regular basis. My question is about the MTBA vote. Will it require a 75% vote from the whole membership, or a 75% majority?
It'll be 75% of those who vote. So the way you will need to vote for the MTBA decision, and I can confirm it will be held as part of our annual general meeting on the 30th of November, that for this decision you will have to vote either via proxy or in person. So it'll be 75% of that total number received via proxy or in person.
I just think there's a bit of a disconnect. There's been talk about cycling as an activity and a sport, and the presentation is very, very sport orientated, and I don't think that necessarily connects with the membership that appears to me to exist with the MTBA at the moment. The work that the Gorillas have done and the rise in the recreational membership because of trail advocacy and the massive successes they've had. There's been a lot of support around that in Sydney in particular. I don't know about where else, but definitely in Sydney. There's not a lot in this presentation that will connect with that recreational membership, and I think that's reflected that there's not a lot of us here.
Yeah, point, but it's a valid point. The MTBA membership is 30% recreation, but they are all an individual member at this stage, and we talk to them equally so they're invited to this process. It is driven by the sport. We've talked about bringing the advocacy bodies in at a later stage and working with them, and we've had preliminary discussions with a few of those organisations about them becoming involved into the AusCycling model. But it's a valid point.
Scott, we've also got some online questions. Participation in the room has been great, but just to ask the questions that are online as well of the panel. David asked one about race sanctioning. Said currently in the track and road disciplines, state federations sanction or approve all state level and below races. He asks, under AusCycling, who will conduct the sanctioning of these types of races?
I think the state management team will administer that, but it'll be through eventually what we want to do is to improve the efficiency of the sanctioning model. So again, so we can reduce the cost of actually doing it. So there will eventually be a central tool to effectively mechanise that.
And one more from online. Chris asks, how will funding of facilities be prioritised? Will funding come down to a vote of members nationally for a grassroots facility, for example?
No, funding, again, I don't see any time soon where facilities are being funded directly by either AusCycling, or if we don't change, by a state and territory body. Facilities get funded by local or state government, and that won't change. What we do want to do, though, is provide some resources for particularly local management teams and clubs to make it easier to be the ones that actually get those facilities instead of cricket and footy and you name it.
Yep, Peter.
Peter Beaumont again. I just wanted to address a recurring point that's come up about the credibility of the CA team. In the 6 years I was on the board, I had the pleasure in the last little while of working with the CA board, getting the World Road Race Championships to this country and to this state in particular, which is the first for this state ever. And through that process, it was largely led by Duncan and Steve and his team. And I remember speaking with you at night when you were in Innsbruck, living at large and watching this year's version go around. And talking to you about the contract negotiations you had with the UCI, and then you brought that back, sat down with government and squeezed them for $20 million and an open checkbook. Now that's not done by people who don't know what they're doing, and as I say, we all should be very pleased that we've got that in front of us and 3 years of marketing ahead of us. So, be aware of the competence of these guys and what they represent. And secondly, I just want to put someone on the spot, and I apologise for doing this, Anne. Anne Gripper's in the room. Anne is a board member at CA and also a member of the Office of Sport, at least as at when I last checked, Anne. The Office of Sport is an arm of government that is very close to funding what we do in New South Wales as far as cycling is concerned. Has been very generous in a number of areas, including the World Road Race Championships, but also what's happening at Dunk Grey in its renovation. And I just wanted to ask you to make a quick comment about government's view on what AusCycling is. Can you give us some bias as to whether you think this is a good thing, whether you encourage us to consider it, or do you think government sees it as a retrograde step for the future?
You didn't want to put her on the spot, but you certainly have.
Thanks, Peter. Well, obviously I can only speak for the New South Wales government. And what I will say is that the government is all about increasing participation in sport and active recreation. And anything that helps to do that is going to be well supported by government. We're also clearly interested in good governance. So good meaning contemporary, keeping up with what expectations are. We're also interested in integrated performance pathways. So there's absolutely nothing in this model that would indicate that that's not going to happen. So from our perspective, coming together like this, bringing the three disciplines and also making a much more effective one organisation would be really, really well supported, certainly by the New South Wales government.
Thanks, Anne, and also Peter. And it's interesting with the World Championships coming, 3 years of marketing for the event, and if you think about the MS Gong Ride, 3 years of marketing within that with recreational riders about a professional cycling event that's coming. So I wonder how many of those rec riders opportunity creates to get them as club members as well, which is what we're all... You guys are doing a great job with the recs, and we know that we certainly have to improve it, and there's a great opportunity with the World Championships to get more rec members.
Thanks for the opportunity. Phil Bates, former CA board member, and when I left we had money in the bank. I've been involved in the sport for over 60 years. I've been on the executive of my club St George for 54 years, the last 25 as president. I spent 18 years on New South Wales cycling. I was 8 years on the World Federation on the track commission and responsible for adding the Madison to the Olympic program, so Scott would be pretty happy about that.
Absolutely.
I also was a founding chairman of Bicycle New South Wales, and I've had the passion of recreational riding. I foresee that as the grassroots is going to need all the support it can get. I haven't been asked or even inquired because as to what St George think about it. When I was on the board of CA, and it was for quite a few years, we had the mountain bike and also BMX on the board. Unfortunately, Tony Scott picked up his bat, put it under his arm, picked up the stumps and went to Canberra, and mountain bikes dispersed from there. You have to, CA, and I have a lot of respect with, for Stephen Drake as well, and I don't know the chairman, Duncan, I apologise for that, but there's credibility to be done, because I know you're keeping your head above water even though there's debt to go, but New South Wales looks upon the issue that there's been a lot of money raised over a period of time, and all they see of that going to CA and propping up. That's basically some of the discussions. From a club perspective, it's very difficult for a club like St George to cater for both BMX and mountain bike. I've got no problems with having the one licence and things of that nature, but I'm a bit concerned that the money that's there from New South Wales, for example, is going to go to CA and benefit all the other states, when maybe it should be split up and sent to the clubs that have contributed to making that profitable. So instead of going to other places in Australia, that might be looking at it single-minded. I still don't know why we haven't got more sponsors in the sport. You said we can't get six-figure sums, and I think Steve will testify to that because he raced in the Commonwealth Bank Cycle Classic. From 1982 to 2015, there's not one event that I ran without government support, no government support, that was less than six-figure, and some were seven figures. So you either got the wrong people pursuing the sponsorship to make things work, and I think that's the credibility that we have to put in place. Mountain bikes has been fantastic sport, and it's a but it's a slightly different culture to what Cycling Australia had been working with for a long, long period of time, and that is working with track and road and those disciplines. We're grateful for what BMX has done because they've provided some great cyclists, mountain bikes, Cadell Evans, our first Tour de France. But I still don't know how that bottom structure and club level, and I speak from a big club and a traditional club that's got a lot of good facilities and still performing with great numbers, getting the last world titles on the track. We had 4 riders, 2 in the juniors, and I still don't know how that's going to benefit. And I looked at all those front things on the first page of the introduction, the tangible benefits of Australian cycling, but why can't half of those be undertaken now? Adding a few 50, 40, 30,000 members to a base is not going to change one iota if you haven't got the right people to pursue the sponsorship. I feel for the sport at the moment. My club turns 100. Lidcombe Auburn turns 100 next year. We'll have great celebrations. But there's bicycle retailers. Nearly most of the bicycle retailers in the country are former cyclists. Some of note, and then there's some like Frank Consacao. That's a bit rough. Yeah. But we don't get any information from CA to promote the thing. We should have something about this big, that wide, telling everyone what's happening in the sport. Everyone who walks into a push bike shop is a potential racer. Yeah. Anyway, that's my 2 pence worth, but thanks very much.
Thanks, Phil. Full respect to Phil for what you have contributed to the sport throughout the nation, not just the bank racing, etc. But you've done so much, and particularly the Madison, mate. Love you. Thank you. Getting it back.
And Phil, I'll try to address some of the points that you made. I'm not sure I got all of them down, but I think the first one, at club level, we're not saying that a road and track club needs to all of a sudden become a multidisciplinary club. Some already exist. If clubs choose to do that, good for them. If they want to focus on road and track or focus on BMX, that's none of our business, and we're not going to try to legislate for that. So clubs kind of stay as they are. I think the point about sponsorship, I probably should have qualified that and said the lack of 6-figure sponsors is outside of events, because clearly we've got $20 million for the Road Worlds, and there's various other events where governments do support us. But where I think we fall down these days is, you had tremendous success with organisations like Commonwealth Bank in the past. We're not getting that cut through at the moment, and part of the reason is the motivation and what sponsors are looking for has changed. Sponsors are looking...
I did also do over 30 hours of national TV with those events on every network, and it's why the Tour Down Under is there. I was told by David McFarlane from South Australia that the whole, what they did, and I had the South Australian government up to have a look at the bank case, and they saw that as an opportunity after they lost the Grand Prix to do so.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think it's a great tool. No, I agree, and all we need is sponsors like the South Australian government who put a ton of money into the Tour Down Under. So if you can find that connection, yes, but without that, what sponsors are more looking for is the data on the target market and the ability to target particular cohorts of people. And again, one of the difficulties we have as 19 small organisations is collecting that data, or even as 3 NSOs. At the moment, we don't have a database across our membership, small as it is, with 55,000. Yeah, and look, I think over time as we build our rec base, we will have more success in targeting those larger sponsors. And I think the point about New South Wales money propping up CA, firstly, there will be no CA. Secondly, the money or the contribution from Sport Australia will be partially used to address the CA debt. So I don't think that's a valid point, Phil. I think the flip side of that as well is that, as I think a point that I made earlier, was that contributions that are made on behalf of members into AusCycle will be bounced straight back out again in the form of benefits provided to those members. So given that New South Wales has a large membership base, it will continue to benefit from that. The different cultures, that's something that we want to preserve, and that's an important part of how we look to bring this organisation together. A BMX race will still be a BMX race. I don't expect to see any Lycra there anytime soon. And the same with the other disciplines. I think, so we're not trying to tweak the culture. What we're trying to do is improve the efficiency of the overall system so that we can push more content and services down into club level and help clubs to thrive.
Thanks, Phil. We'll have to start thinking about wrapping up, so just a couple more questions.
Sorry, guys, just another thing. There's obviously a fair bit of angst in the room here between Cycling New South Wales and Cycling Australia, and at some stage that's just got to be let go. I feel for you guys. There's obviously angst. I don't know the background of it. I'm just saying for the greater benefit of moving forward. But at the end of the day, at the state advisory board level, cycling as a sport will only hold 33%. They won't hold... this is not all about cycling, guys. There's other 2 disciplines involved here as well. Okay, at a national level, they'll even hold less power. They'll hold 25% there. So you've got to put your trust somewhere in. Look at the other sports of mountain biking and BMX. If you don't have trust in Cycling Australia, which will be disbanded, they've said that multiple times today. Put your trust in the other guys because they hold 75%. And the other people that aren't, there's 25% will make up that board from not even with inside any of the disciplines, from outside entirely. So, as I said before, guys, we've just got to think about moving forward. There's angst there, I get it, but at some stage, we've got to let it go. History's history. History's in books. I understand your clubs have got 100 years coming up, but you know what? We read about history, we live the future, we live the present, and that's just where we're going to head, guys. In my opinion, that's where it's at.
Thinking about the future, aren't we? We want a future. Thanks, Bluey. A future that's bigger and better than the current present. Over the back. Yep, just let the mic come around. Sorry, just wait. No, but it's for the people online. If it's not on the mic, then it's not done.
I may have missed something earlier, but
okay.
And it may be somewhere in your documentation, which I haven't seen. And another qualification, I have a love-hate relationship with mission statements. But have you got one? Can somebody stand up and give us 3 lines about what the mission of AusCycling is?
All riders, all bikes, all states.
All riders, all bikes, all states. That's not a mission statement. No. It doesn't tell us anything.
So we're going to come together tonight as three disciplines and debate a mission statement. Dave, did you wanted to say that? Ian? And we'll bring it back to you, Dave.
Sorry about that.
You can wrap it up, Dave.
From a club support point of view, this current year, it's been possible for many people to join Cycling Australia directly and not join a club. Is under the AusCycling proposal, will memberships be directed through a club in the first instance, or will people be able to just get a rec licence and become one of a completely unconnected group?
Yes, they will, because that's what a lot of people want to do. They don't want to join clubs, and if we force people to join clubs, they don't join.
But they can't race. If they want to race, they have to join a club. Dave?
So if you wish to race, the avenues you'll need to be as a club member, or you'll have to buy a day licence, which is very similar today. But if you join as a rec member, and the experience for mountain bike members who join outside the club network is that they pay a higher fee to be a rec member without a club, because we've designed a system to preserve and promote club membership and affiliation. So I would expect AusCycling will take on that. But the other important point is that a rec member who is not a member of a club will not have any say in the voting of the organisation.
Yeah, that kind of exists because the way the system works, they have to go somewhere, so they're allocated to Cycling New South Wales. They're technically unrepresented, I think, because no, I mean, an individual member in Cycling New South Wales doesn't get to vote anyway. It's the clubs that are technically the members of Cycling New South Wales. So they're it's the clubs that are the voters.
Look, I know we have, because there have been a lot of questions tonight, we have let things run a fair way over time, so I would like to wrap things up, and maybe, Dave, depends on how you wrap things up. You could, this could be the last question.
Well, it's sort of a question, sort of a comment. It's about sponsorship and media, and I know Phil alluded to it earlier, and I know Phil's an absolute legend in both cycling, event management and many other things, but the comment I wanted to make is how much both media and sponsorship has changed, not just since the 80s, the 90s, in the past 5 years. If traditional media or traditional watching of sport just doesn't happen like it used to, again, bringing sports together or bringing these disciplines together gives us what I would see is a much greater chance of getting some form of coverage. Now, it mightn't be on television anymore. It might be through YouTube. It might be through Facebook. I just don't know. It is changing, but unless we come together as a group, as cycling or as bicycling or whatever we want to call it, I just don't think we're going to have a chance. We're going to become more disparate, more separated, and our differences will be exacerbated. With this model, I just feel like we've got a chance to bring cycling back to possibly what it was in the glory days. So that's my comment.
Thanks, Dave. No, look, that's also the way I see it. It's an opportunity to grow and move forward, and in particular talk about media. Look, I'm the race director for the Jacko Herald Sun Tour. I know what it takes to try and get the television on board, and I know there's another very large event in Australia where that's covered, but the particular network that covers it doesn't pay a single cent to have it. So that's completely delivered to them. So that's where we're at with our biggest event. So just be mindful of where we are going if we don't really come together as one. One more? Oh, that's it. No, no, not for you. You want to leave? No, right. No, I think we've gone far enough. We've done enough. Look, thanks everybody for coming together. New South Wales, strong, proud, and passionate state, and we really appreciate you guys taking the time. Thank you. Everyone's no, we're done.
G'day, how